燃え上がれガンダム。Hello and welcome to Weekly Suit Gundam, a special bonus podcast brought to you by the folks at Japanimation Station. I am Sean Chapman.
And I'm Jonathan Lack.
And we are here once again to talk about Gundam every week, baby. We're always here, week in, week out. Last week we talked about Gundam stuff. This week we're talking about more Gundam stuff. And this week we have a very special episode because, Jonathan, I have been carrying a weight on my shoulder for over 8 years now, since I watched Mobile Suit Gundam Seed Destiny for the first time, a show that had so much potential and didn't execute on any of it, so many good ideas, and none of them used well. The most frustrating TV show I think I've ever seen in my life. One of the inspirations for Weekly Suit Gundam, Gundam Seed Destiny. We did an episode on it that had a certain amount of catharsis to it, being able to share in the grief of the frustration of Seed Destiny, a terrible sequel to a great TV show. But now I feel that weight is lifted, because we are going to talk today about Mobile Suit Gundam Seed Freedom, the movie sequel to Gundam Seed Destiny, which is the most cathartic movie viewing experience I think I've ever had, because I just don't care that Seed Destiny was bad anymore, because this movie kicks so much ass. It kicks just an unbelievable amounts of ass, and I'm super, super excited to talk about it today.
Well, me too, and I got to see this movie first, because it came out in U.S. theaters in May, but for one night only. For the Japanese version, you weren't able to go to that, so I had written a review, and that review is out there on the internet, so I think people knew my thoughts, which is that I liked it an awful lot. I don't think it's perfect, but I don't think anything in Gundam Seed is perfect, but I think I agree completely with you, Sean. It changes the valence of the Gundam Seed project completely. Because now, if you're telling someone to watch Gundam Seed, you don't have to say, it's this great 50-episode show and this terrible 50-episode show that'll leave you kind of sad. Kira Yamato goes from being a cool character to the worst Gundam protagonist in the sequel. Now you can say, it's got a bad middle entry, and then it's got a phenomenal fucking ending that basically just does the plot of Destiny, but better this time. And that's what Gundam Seed Freedom is, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, I was just so hyped up after watching the movie last night. So I watched it last night. I shouldn't have watched it as late as I did, because I had a hard time going to sleep, because it's the last 30 to 40 minutes of this movie are just so intense. It's got an incredible ending. It's just a mic drop ending. And then I was like, holy shit. I was like shaking because I had so much fun watching it. Because part of it is just, it's a great movie. Part of it is also this feeling of like redemption or something for the show I loved so much in Gundam Seed, and Seed Destiny is just, again, it's a frustrating show because there are so many good ideas, because the Destiny plan is a good idea for a plot for a Gundam Seed sequel in many ways. Shinn Asuka is a really interesting character that has a lot of really interesting things about him. Trying to find ways of what happens with Kira and Lacus in a world after Gundam Seed is a really interesting question that is probably the biggest ball dropped by Seed Destiny. And Seed Freedom, it's not a redo of Destiny. It is a direct sequel to it. It doesn't ignore that it existed or retcons it or in any way, shape, or form. It just looks at all the ideas of what Seed Destiny was kind of trying to do and failed to do, and it just nails all of them in one 2-hour-long movie. And it's just so invigorating. And I'm jealous now of people who get to come to Gundam Seed for the first time, that gets to be their ending point. They don't have to wander blindly in the dark for years and years and years and years waiting for something to bring clarity to this really frustrating series. And instead it just gets to be the great series that you wanted it to be.
I completely agree. And I think what we talked, if you want to go back to our Gundam Seed Destiny episode, you can find it on the Japanimation Station feed or channel. It's in there for Seed and Seed Destiny. And we talked all about the problems Destiny had. And I think an important thing to remember, and I think this is true of a lot of art that goes awry, is I don't think anyone who worked on Destiny thought that turned out well, right?
Yeah.
Like, the people
Clearly,
who made...
they redid the ending like 3 different times.
Yes, yeah. The people who made Destiny... Look, Destiny is a show that has a recap special like 4 episodes from the end. It was a troubled production. It got away from them. And that's part of why it is frustrating is... I will disagree with you slightly on Destiny, Sean, in that I do think it executes some of its ideas well at different points. It is a different show than like Gundam Build Divers, which is all bad all the time. Destiny has stretches that are virtuosic. Destiny has characters who work great. It is the totality of it that falls apart, and it is the phenomenon of watching obviously talented people fail to pull the strings together for whatever reason that makes Destiny so frustrating. And I think as frustrated as we as fans were with it, I think you have to remember, I am guessing the people who made it are like 10 times more frustrated because they made it, and it clearly didn't say the things they wanted it to say. And there is a catharsis to Seed Freedom that I think is not just for us as viewers, but you can feel it on screen in the way that, like, this is a tight 2-hour movie that feels like it's doing about 6 hours of plot. And it is doing it on, like, the whole movie is happening at 3x speed. And not in the way like Gundam F91 was, where there's just chunks missing. But, like, it's all in there. There are whole character arcs that are blink and you'll miss it, because they are so excited to be doing it all. And this is not a complaint. It's something I really, especially on a second viewing, like about Seed Freedom a lot, is that sort of creative, effervescent... love for making the thing that is here. It was clearly a cathartic act, in no small part because this is also, a show that was made by a husband-wife team, one of whom has passed away, and the other whom was finishing it. And I think that's all in there as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, it is just this thing that, just the Seed franchise has had this weird pall on it forever. And this movie was in production hell since the end of Seed Destiny. We'll go into some of the details of that because I went through and kind of put together the timeline on all of this stuff. And yeah, it just kind of feels like now all those pieces come together. Like, one of my favorite follows on Twitter and one of my favorite video game streamers on YouTube is the voice actress Tanaka Die, who voices Lacus, and Lacus being like her first really big breakout role. And when this movie came out in Japan, and it was huge in Japan, we'll talk about the numbers it did, like, you could just feel the joy she had of, like, being able to come back to this, like, really defining character that just sort of never got fully served by the sequel. I mean, she played Mir in the sequel in Destiny, which is the best character in Destiny, probably, like, the most well-executed one. But there's just this sense of, like, being able to come back and bring all that stuff home. Obviously, you've also got, like, Shinn is huge there, and just the whole project feels so like joyous that all these people get to come back and kind of land this ship the right way that they had wanted to for like 20 years at this point.
Yeah, it's awesome. It is a massive relief. I love that this exists, and we'll talk about it. I think there are choices made to effectively make this look like Seed always did, for better and notably for worse. But in the end, like, especially after a second viewing, I kind of wouldn't have it any other way. I like that this movie sort of feels like it fell out of a time portal from 2006. And there is something magical about we're finishing Seed. We're not reimagining Seed. We're finishing the fucking job. And they did it.
Yes, yeah. We'll get into the aesthetic stuff, which I could see why it would be very off-putting to some people. I fucking love it. I mean, I don't love the aesthetic of Seed, but I love that they committed to the aesthetic of Seed because it's part of the whole package. But let's go into a little bit of like the production history here, because it is very interesting, right? Because this movie had been in development forever. So this movie had been in development since the conclusion of Gundam Seed Destiny. When Seed Destiny finished, Sunrise announced a whole big series of spin-offs and follow-up projects that were under the banner Gundam Seed Explosion, with no E, just the X, because it's cool.
That sounds like the Gundam Seed porn parody, I have to say. If you just added 2 more X's, that is definitely the Gundam Seed porn parody.
Yes. Gundam Seed triple explosion. Go to the Comic near you to go buy that from your aspiring doujin artists. This included, so one of the things in the Gundam Seed explosion was the special edition ending of Destiny, the first go around at trying to fix the ending of Destiny, the Stargazer OVA, and then also a continuation of the very popular manga spin-off series Seed Astray, which is set in Orb with their like samurai-looking Gundams they had in Orb. It was announced in May 2006 that part of the explosion would be the movie sequel to Seed Destiny, which at that point was untitled. It was announced that the director-writer team, which was also a husband-wife pair of Fukuda Mitsuo and Morosawa Chiaki, would be returning to helm the project with an initial planned release in sometime in 2007. In their initial thing, they're like, yeah, this will probably come out sometime next year in 2007. After that initial wave of announcements, news around the production went dark, and the projected release date of 2000, sometime there in 2007, just went by, and there was no update. And then the first update on the production was in April 2008, where in an issue of New Type magazine, the reasons for the delay became clear with an interview with the writer Morosawa, where she revealed that they had already kind of written the plot. They had basically the whole story treatment had been done forever ago at that point, but the production was delayed because of her health issues, that she had suffered various health issues since the ending of the original Gundam Seed. This is one of the reasons why Seed Destiny goes off the plot, basically, is because she was struggling with her health throughout the production of Seed Destiny and it got worse over the course of that. And at that point in 2008, she announced that the production was delayed, but it was not canceled. After this, the director Fukuda made a bunch of updates on the official blog Seed Club Mobile, which was a mobile phone blog, throughout 2008 and 2009, with just like little tiny updates about like, oh, and we're adjusting the story here, and we're talking with this mech designer there, that kind of stuff. And then after 2009, all updates on the production stopped, and all updates on the production stopped other than like vague rumors in like, oh, TM Revolution said this here of like, oh, it's not over yet. But any official updates stopped for 17 years at that point. And in February 2016, that's when the writer Morosawa passed away. And it became clear at that point that like the health struggles were much more like long-term, manifold, and more complicated than I think was publicly known before at that point. She had been in and out of surgeries for like 10 years. And just like very severe health issues. And that's obviously why the production was delayed, was just like she was not able to work on it. And then when the director is her husband, right, he is obviously not going to be working that hard on it either when he's trying to take care of his wife and all of that. And it's notable that Fukuda, the director, he does like one or two things. The most notable one, Cross Anja, in this time period. That's like 2014, I think. But like he does very little work compared to like he was very prolific pre-Gundam Seed. And so it's obvious that like they're just not doing a lot of stuff for totally understandable reasons. And then Morosawa passes away in 2016. It's then in the second half of 2019, behind closed doors, so it's not known publicly at the time, but in 2019 is when production of the movie silently resumed, when Fukuda approached the novelist Goto Liu, who was the guy who had previously written novelizations of Gundam Seed and Seed Destiny when those shows were coming out, and he asked him to take a look at Morosawa's story stuff for the movie and then help update it and bring it into a modern screenplay. And then also part of that project was turning it into a novelization, which is already out in Japan. The renewed production on the film then was then officially announced to the public on May 28th, 2021, as part of the Seed 20th anniversary project, Gundam Seed Project Ignited, which we talked about that on the podcast when all that was going on. Then after the finale of Witch from Mercury in July 2023 was when it was announced that the film was Mobile Suit Gundam Seed Freedom, with Seed and Freedom in all caps. That's the only proper way to write the title of this film. And that would be released on January 26, 2024. The movie would receive a wide release in 353 theaters, and it quickly became a huge, massive hit in Japan. It had very strong reviews. It got super high ratings on like audience satisfaction surveys. You definitely see a lot of stories of people going and seeing the movie 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, which after having seen the movie, I totally get why this is a movie you just keep on going back into the theater for. And it ultimately earned 4.8 billion yen, making it the highest grossing Gundam movie, more than doubling the 2.3 billion earned by 1982's Encounters in Space, the last movie of the original Gundam trilogy of films. And it is currently, I think, the 5th highest grossing movie in the Japanese box office for 2024.
Yeah, I mean, it is amazing when you put it in perspective that boy, Encounters in Space was a big hit because it had not been surpassed within the Gundam franchise in 43 years. But then also, I mean, it more than doubled it. 4.8
Yeah.
versus 2.3 billion. That's huge for Japan. And for Gundam, which, outside of some of the early stuff has never necessarily been a box office juggernaut. It's been more obviously a TV thing. But yeah, huge hit. And, I think the question was, is the demand for more Seed still there in Japan, which is where Gundam Seed has always been most popular? And yes, the answer was very much yes. And that's awesome.
Yeah, and because also, obviously it's, while this movie is the culmination of a project that started at the time when Seed Destiny ended, it is now effectively one of your kind of like nostalgia, reboot, I mean, not reboot sequels, but like bringing it back kind of sequels that are all the rage nowadays, particularly in Hollywood. And so it kind of ends up weirdly in that bucket as well. So I think, Seed is 20 plus years old now. It is, you have this whole generation that now kind of had grown up on Seed, is now older, they have their own kids. And kind of going back to the theater, and you kind of get that market. And so that's one of those things where it's easy to forget how big Seed was, but Seed broke so many records in terms of DVD sales and shit like that when it was coming out, that audience having this your big kind of nostalgia hit while also just it being a kick-ass movie. It's a good 1-2 punch.
And we'll talk about this more in a minute, but it's the real deal of a nostalgia hit. Anyone who was alive to still work on this movie worked on the movie, who was involved in the originals, even if they, like, as a recording artist, hadn't recorded under that name in 20 years. They did it, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. One interesting thing is right now in Japan, there is a release of the movie in theaters with a special edition that has updates and changes to over 500 cuts to the movie. Again, it is currently in theaters, so I have no idea what are the nature of those updates or changes, but I like that it's Seed Freedom is so on its Seed bullshit that and we're going to do the weird special edition blah 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 blah, and we're going to do that too, because Seed obviously did that with everything multiple times, and then you have your HD version and all that kind of shit. So I'm totally here for them doing the weird special edition after the movie already came out on Blu-ray. So I don't know if they're going to do a special edition.
It's not on Blu-ray yet.
Yeah, is it not?
No, it's not.
The movie came out in Japan on Blu-ray.
It comes out on Christmas Day in Japan, December 25th, and they still haven't revealed the cover art for that Blu-ray or some of the details, because I suspect it will have these versions, and they hadn't detailed it fully yet.
Yeah.
So you can pre-order it, but its details are still a little scant. That special edition will also have one of 2 different additional epilogues they've attached to the end of the movie, and I'm curious what those are. I really hope the Blu-ray just has everything so you can compare and contrast, because that would be fun.
Yes, that's the hope. I hope that they have all the versions on that Blu-ray, or at the very least, the special edition, because I'm very curious what that is and what the changes are.
What you might be thinking of, Sean, is it did get a streaming release in Japan a month or 2 ago, so it's on Japanese Netflix is where it premiered for streaming. So that's when it became available online, I think, for torrenting, not a cam rip, is because it had that Japanese streaming release. So
okay, there you go. It did, as you intimated earlier, Jonathan, it did have a 2-day release, 1 day for subs, 1 day for dubs in the US on May 7th and 8th, 2024, but that was during a school night, because I can just only assume that Fathom Events, that was how the movie came out over here, hates public school teachers, and they just don't want public school teachers to see the movie. That's just my assumption. I'm just reading between the lines there, but do that shit on a Saturday. I mean, I get why they don't, because Saturdays are where everyone's going to go to the movies, and they're not going to do the weird anime movie, but you should do the weird anime movie on Saturday, because I want to go see it.
Yes, I wish they had. I went to see it. The projector was slightly out of focus, and it was out of focus in such a way that it was the bottom middle of the screen, which is where the subtitles are. So the subtitles were slightly fuzzy. Not enough that you couldn't read them, but enough that this movie has shotgun blasts worth of dialogue, just constantly just rattling at you. I did have a headache by the end of the movie trying to keep up with the blurry subtitles and the crazy action maximalism, and that was annoying. I was one of the only people in the theater, and I was sitting in the front. And by the end of the movie, when they do the drop of the Meteor insert song, I went, fuck yeah, in my seat. Yeah. And then I kind of looked around I'm the only person doing this, but I don't care. That's what that moment is there for. So
I mean, in Japan there are 100. I mean, my sense is that Japanese theater culture is not to get up and shout in the movie theater, but there are moments that are that. I was just fucking hell yeah, god damn it, hell yes. There's one of those about every 10 to 15 minutes, and there's one about every 1 minute in the last 40 minutes of the movie. It's pretty that stuff is pretty fun. The movie did get, and one of the reasons why we're doing this podcast now, in a kind of a funny way, is that it did get a Netflix release in the US on September 1st. Although that is not the version that either of us watched for this podcast, because inexplicably, insanely, I mean, I'm sure there's some sort of weird rights thing somewhere along the way, but this only has the English dub on the US Netflix, which is particularly confusing for a number of reasons, one of which being they have an option there that says English closed captions, but they're not English closed captions. It's the subtitles for the Japanese version, which is very fucking weird when there's no Japanese language there, but the English subtitles is the track you'd use for the Japanese language option. And then also the only people credited on the page on Netflix for the cast are the Japanese ones. I didn't check inside the movie, I'm sure they're there. But if you like look at it on Netflix on that page where you select what you're streaming, all the people in the cast section are just the Japanese voices who do not appear in the version on that website. So it is a very, very weird Netflix release that only has the English dub.
Even though they also that day put up the TV series Gundam Seed and Seed Destiny, and guess what? They're in Japanese with English subtitles. So it makes no sense. It could be a rights issue. I'm also not convinced it isn't just an error, because it looks like an error. Like the way that you just described it, that it's got the wrong captions, it's got the wrong cast listed. It's bizarre. It is also worth noting, it is a comically terrible English dub. Like it is it is that kind of example of like, it sounds like the kind of thing that you would hear about like some weird like dub that you would get from like Hong Kong in the 2000s for an anime that was for like the local English market there with whatever randos could speak English, and it's like, and it would crop up as like jokes on YouTube in the day. That's the kind of dub this got. They call Lacus Lacus.
Yeah, it is notably, if you were someone who watched the original Gundam Seed English dubs, it's not those people. So it's like, I mean, I know we're not dub people, but I know that dub has its fans. There are people that's like their version of Gundam Seed. That's what they had watched. And it sucks for them that they didn't get those people back because of how far, with one notable exception we'll talk about, but Seed Freedom goes far and wide to bring back people in terms of the crew and cast and stuff. For the Japanese side of things, that it sucks for the English dub people that this is the version that they get. It seems like it's particularly shitty as far as English dubs go.
Yeah. But there you go. That's how it goes.
There you go. So if you want to watch it, go find other means. If you haven't seen it yet, you should see it. And you can know, it's just if you Google around a little bit and you know where to go, you can see it with the proper version and it's fine.
There is no moral compunction against torrenting when they will not put out, when they have it streaming and they don't put up the actual original language, which is effectively unheard of now. Does not happen unless it's like Pokemon. That's like the only thing that doesn't put out the Japanese. Fuck them. Just go torrent it. Yeah.
Very weird. In terms of the crew here, it's like basically all people that were involved in Seed and or Seed Destiny. So the director is obviously once again Fukuda Mitsuo, here to direct. The screenplay has 3 people credited. Morosawa Chiaki, posthumously credited here. Obviously, again, we know that the whole story treatment, like I've never seen anyone describe it as being a script, so I do not know if there was like a screenplay that was finished, but we know the whole story and plot and all that stuff was laid out by Morosawa back in like 2006, and this is still broadly going off of that. But then you have Liu Goto, the writer, and Fukuda Mitsuo, the director, coming in, and they're also credited as sort of like shaping it up into the screenplay we have for this film. In terms of music, Sahashi Toshihiko is returning. He did the music in Seed and Seed Destiny, and it's a great soundtrack here that takes a bunch of awesome cues from Seed and Seed Destiny, like taking Lacus's song from the original Gundam Seed that she sings and using that as the leitmotif for her character in so many great places. Like, it's just a great soundtrack.
It's truly one of my favorite Gundam soundtracks ever. This is the big cinematic version of Gundam Seed, and it's so fucking good.
Yeah, Seed and Seed Destiny had amazing... I mean, it's the best thing about Seed Destiny. Like, it's the thing that was not compromised in that production, is the music is just as good, if not in some places maybe even better than the original Gundam Seed. And it's just so good getting all this new music, but also really smart applications of a lot of the really iconic music from the original show coming back. Character design is Hirai Hisashi, who did the character design for the original Gundam Seed and Seed Destiny. You don't need to be told that it's the same guy. You can tell. You just look at the new characters and like, fuck yeah, yep, it's that guy, and he's not trying to change it. Like, he's going for what worked or maybe didn't work back then, and we're just sticking with it. And I am totally on board with that choice. The sound director is Fujino Sadayoshi, returning from Destiny. The art director is Ikeda Shigemi, returning from Seed and Seed Destiny, with Maruyama Yukiko, who was credited on Destiny for artboard. Director of photography was Katsurayama Takashi, returning, and then Toyoka Shigenori, who is new. The chief mechanical animation director was Shigeta Satoshi, and he is returning from Seed and Seed Destiny. And then also the editing is Nojiri Yukiko, who's returning from Destiny. So basically almost every single major production credit was someone who is either on both Seed and Seed Destiny or on Destiny, partnered occasionally with someone who is new to the franchise. So it is top to bottom. And if also like a lot of the animators, obviously like a lot of this is just like also people work at Sunrise who have worked on every Gundam. But if you go through the credits, it is most people you click on did something on Seed or Seed Destiny, which is pretty awesome. The major place where that is not true, for obvious reasons, is the CGI. So there are 3 CGI directors credited here, all of them being Sunrise people who have worked on a bunch of Gundam stuff. Fujiya Tomohiro, who my impression is that he is like the main one. He was the CGI director on Unicorn, Thunderbolt, and Gundam Hathaway, or one of the directors on Hathaway. Hathaway had 2 people. Sato Mitsuhiro was one of the CGI directors on Gundam The Origins, and then Kushida Kensuke did CGI design for Gundam The Origins, was a CGI production assistant on Witch from Mercury, and this is the first time he's done something credited as a CGI director. But this is obviously a lot of like the people who have been doing the CGI for the modern, I say modern, I mean, it's like some of these are like 10 to 15-year-old shows at this point. But this sort of like, latter 21st century era Gundam that has moved to CGI for a lot of the OVAs, it's a lot of those people coming in who do a lot of work on all of these different ones. It's a lot of those same people here. And I was a little bit, kind of bummed initially at the idea of the Seed movie having a bunch of CGI stuff just based on the announcement. Because there was like one of the places where I felt like you're being very divergent from the original, but it's such the action of this movie is so incredible. It's so good. It makes sense that one of the 2 main CGI directors from Hathaway was one of the main directors for the CGI stuff on this movie, because it has a lot of that, just like, it's stylistically different, but it has a lot of that energy and that like willingness to do things with the action with mobile suits that you can only do because they're going CGI. They're not just trying to replicate exactly what the original show did. And they're finding lots of ways to do a lot of the iconic Seed action stuff, but in a way that CGI is able to give a very different kind of version of it, like let's do our big Panzer Dragoon lock onto every single mobile suit in a 5-mile radius and shoot them with shit. It does that multiple times, and all those scenes are amazing. So in the end, I think the moving to CGI was absolutely the right choice for this production.
Yes, I think this is one that it makes sense for it. I think it's probably the most CGI in a traditionally animated Gundam ever. It has to be. Like, I mean, the Origin is a longer production, I guess, because it's 6 hours, but this just has, especially near the end, most of what is moving on screen is CGI, and it's very good.
Yeah, so kick-ass stuff. And it's just awesome to see like how far they went to just try to bring people back from that original production. And
when you're down to like director of photography, which in anime obviously means something a little different, but like you can tell the composition and the way they like integrate CG assets, the way it's doing all those 1970s Gundam things of having the split screens to show you inside the cockpit. Like there's a lot of Tomino from early Gundam in here because that was Seed did all of that as kind of an homage, and it's just there's stuff like that where you're like, yes, you kind of had to have the right people at all layers, even down to like the editing. This has an editorial rhythm that is all Fukuda, like this is Flashback of all Fukuda. There is just crappy standard def footage from an old TV show at various points in this multi-million-dollar movie, and nobody blinks an eye because that's what this is.
Yes, this movie is the ultimate, like, proving point of the thing I've always asserted when people accuse Seed of being like, oh, it's just cheap, and that's why they use the flashbacks. It's just cheap. I'm like, no. Like, every once in a while, sure, like, the shitty recap episode near the end of Destiny, yes, that's cheap in order to sort of, like, give the production more time and space. But generally speaking, it's like, no, that's just Fukuda's doing that purely stylistically. Like, he's doing that on purpose. He wants to use the flashbacks. This movie is proof of that, because yes, not only are there a shit ton of like quick flashback moments, but they just use the footage from the shows. And it is like all blown up and really shitty looking, and it's great. That's again, like, even the choices that they make that I think on paper you would say, oh, this is the wrong choice. Like, this thing, it kind of looks ugly. It looks this, that, the other thing. I'm like, no, that's what it has to be. If you have any affection in your heart for Mobile Suit Gundam Seed, this is what it has to be. And yes, is it like messy and kind of fucked up? 100%. But I want the kind of messy and fucked up shit because that's kind of part of the charm. That's part of the appeal of it.
Let's put a pin in that. We're going to talk about that more in just a minute, but let's finish your notes here because there's a few more things to go through.
Yes. So we also have the songs, talking about bringing people back from the original production. So the opening theme song is Freedom, again, all capitals properly, which is by Nishikawa Takanori with T. Komodo, which back in the day you would have just called them TM Revolution. I guess they just don't like put out music under that name anymore, but it's TM Revolution, the people you know from the original themes for Gundam Seed and some of the great insert songs, some of which they use in this movie, and that fucking Freedom. That song kicks so much ass. It charted at number 3 on the Oricon charts, which is the first time since we did like K-On! Stuff that I've looked at an anime thing and the song was like one of the best-selling songs of its release. And it totally makes sense. 1, because Nishikawa / Team Revolution is a really popular artist still. But 2, because the song is just so incredibly good. And the opening sequence where it is used is just phenomenal. It's a great start to this film.
It's awesome. The like, this movie is very good at like picking the exact cut on which to start the song. They do it for all of them, but it's a great song. It's a great single, and it just sounds like it could have been the theme song to a show in 2004. Like, it is so right there. You play the what's the name of the original song for Seed?
Oh, God, I'm blanking on it.
Sorry.
I know what you're talking about.
That one you could do. Seed Destiny is called Ignited, and then this one you just play them back to back. And you're like, yeah, those were all recorded in 2003, weren't they? No, that's how much they nailed it.
Yeah, it is just a phenomenal song. And I've been listening to that song I put it on my playlist when this originally came out in Japan, and so I've listened to it a lot. But it is even better seeing it in context. And then you have the ending theme is Saregawa no Romantics, or the Romantics of Parting, which is by Seesaw. Which is the sort of code name for the Ishikawa Chiaki singer and Kajura Yuki composer pairing that, of course, we had with Annani Isho Datta ni and Kimi wa Boku ni Niteru and several other songs from Seed and Seed Destiny. This was the first Seesaw single since Kimi wa Boku ni Niteru, which was the second ending theme to Seed Destiny in 2005. So this is like a 19-year-long in the making reunion for Seesaw. And bring them back under that exact credit, which is very cool.
And it's so obviously Yuki Kajura. Like, there's the beginning of it sounds like a Kalafina song. It's so good. And it just feels like it could have been made back in the day. It's perfect.
Yeah, it's absolutely phenomenal. Then there are 2 insert songs. One which is a new song, Bokyo, which is by Nakashima Mika. This is a song that plays when Kira and Lacus reunite on the ship near the end, at the beginning of kind of the big action climax. This is the same artist that did the song Find the Way, which was the last ending theme to the original Gundam Seed.
One of my favorite Gundam songs. I love that one.
It's a great song. This new insert song is also very good. It fits that scene so perfectly. It's just another cool way to say, like, hey, let's bring back someone who worked on the original Seed. And she's just a really big artist, so it's good to get her anyways. But then the biggest mic drop moment of the whole movie, and the thing that I was just so pumped to see, is they do just bring back Meteor by TM Revolution, which is the super iconic insert song from the original Gundam Seed that plays at the kick-ass midpoint of that show when Kira comes in on the Seed Freedom, or on the Gundam Freedom, and then blows up all the shit and saves the ship, Archangel, and is like, that's where he becomes proper Gundam Superman. And it's just when they play that song again here in the most hype moment you have ever seen in any film that's ever existed, or at least that's what it feels like in the moment, and you're like, hell yes. Oh my God, this song is amazing.
It's an out-of-body moment. Like, when I say, like, I jumped up in the theater, it's involuntary. Like, it is just like, oh my God. It is one of the most perfect uses of an insert song I have ever seen.
It's so good. So yes, the music, both the sort of instrumental music for the movie and the songs they put in the movie, all of them perfect. All of them just adding to that vibe of, like, this is, other than obviously the CGI, which they would not have been able to do, this is just the movie they would have made in 2007 if they could have done it. It's just like top to bottom, every single piece of that, the people working on it, again, the CGI stuff aside, the songs and the music, all that stuff, the aesthetic they go for, it's like, yep, this is just that 2007 movie. It's just, for a lot of very sad reasons, they were not able to make it then, but we finally got it now, and it was worth the wait.
Yep. And then for the cast, there's really only one recast, right? Did you want to talk about that?
Yes. Yeah, so in terms of the returning characters, it's all the same people, including some like pretty obscure characters like Hilda from Seed Destiny, who I like had to double check because I was like, I think that character looks familiar. That's the eye patch lady. I was like, I think she was in Seed Destiny, and had to look her up. But you do have, we have this continuation. We talked about it on the Seed and Seed Destiny podcast of the weird like backroom drama or whatever it is between Naomi Shindo, the original actress for Kagali, and Seed, where if you remember, we talked about that after Seed Destiny, it was very spotty whether or not like the games and stuff like that would actually get her back to play Kagali. There's a lot of sort of like rumors around, like Kagali's role in Seed Destiny was sort of, minimized a lot particularly in the back half of that show. And who knows the truth about like if there is actually beef there or what, but notably she is the one returning character that is recast. It is Nanako Mori, who is a great actress. I think she does a great job as Kagali. Kagali's not a huge part of this film, but it fits the character well. But it is amusing or like kind of it's just interesting to see that this sort of weird whatever the fuck it is has continued to happen. Although notably there was one other actor that there are all these rumors about as well, who also was not in some of the games, which is the actor for Dierka, who's one of the three Zaft guys, all the back to original Seed, who works with Izak. And he is voiced by Sasanuma Akira, who voiced him in the original show in Destiny. So he did come back for this movie. Even though he was not in some of the games. And again, there was like rumors about bad blood somewhere in the production there. So who knows? The official statement on why they recast was just very PR, like in discussions with parties involved in both people. Like it was decided that the best choice was to move forward with a new actress is basically what the official decision and like announcement was. But yes, it is that weird drama as with everything in this movie. It's all just Seed, man. So the weird drama shit and rumors, it's all there too. It's all here with this.
Yes. I mean, this is maybe the most stacked cast for any single Gundam production, because you have the whole cast of Seed who all became stars. You have the whole cast of Seed Destiny who were or then became stars. And then you have a who's who list of various like newer stars like Hiro Shimono and long-standing stars like Yuichi Nakamura, who is credited 26th down the cast list. I counted this. That's how stacked this cast list is that Nakamura Yuichi is the 26th listed person on the cast. Like, is there any other single Gundam production that goes that fucking deep?
Yeah, I mean, look, but this is that thing where, like, so Seed Destiny was one of Suzumura Kenichi, who plays Shinn. That's one of his, like, big breakout roles with Shinn in Seed Destiny. Suzumura Kenichi is the CEO of the talent agency that Nakamura Yuichi works for. Yes. That's how like long this has been and how like crazy it is of like these people in that original cast who are like now like some of like the biggest voice actors, like Tanaka Rie as Lacus. You of course have like Sakamoto Maya as Luna Maria Hawk, which is very funny having her come back as Luna Maria, where now it's like that was really one of her first roles. And she doesn't sound like Sakamoto Maya as Sakamoto all the time in Seed Destiny. And here, like, oh my god, yeah, that's Sakamoto Maya, and also Kenichi Suzumura's wife, and it's a whole thing. It is so funny how big so many of those original people became. And then, then you have this whole cast of younger people, relatively younger people, like Hiroshima no Yuichi Nakamura. Tamara Yukari plays Aura, the evil little kid. Uesaka Sumire is Ingrid, the blue-haired girl that's in love with the Shimanohiro character. Fucking Matsuoka Yoshitsugu, who, is like Kirito in Sword Art Online. He plays one of the Black Knights who has the funniest name in the whole production because his name is just Daniel Harper, which is just a normal guy name, because the other ones are named like Shura Serpentine is the Nakamura character, and then Shura Serpentine, apparently he works with Dan Harper.
Yes, working for Orphe Lam Tao. It's just, it's like, I love it. Daniel, the Gundam Seed, maybe of all the AU shows, is most tapped into the Tomino naming conventions, and that continues with Freedom. Yes, definitely. Yeah. Yes,
but the point being, you have Kirito in Sword Art Online, and the main character of like every random rom-com and what have you anime these days, is playing someone who's such a like background dude.
Yeah.
But that also is one of those things that feels a lot like Seed or Seed Destiny, because you had shit in that show where you had like Suabe Junichi, who's like Archer from Fate Stay Night, is one of just the random goons who works with Stella in Seed Destiny. You know, like Tomokazu Seki is Izak, who's, he's like a higher ranked character in terms of the overall world of importance. But it was, that original show also had a lot of like very notable actors playing fairly minor roles. And so it sort of fits that like the random goons are all voiced by people who are very notable. Like I didn't even pull everybody from my list and my notes here because there's too many. I just grabbed some of the ones that really stood out to me. But
I mean, Shuichi Ikeda has new lines as Durandal in this. Like,
yes.
That is how... And what's the last time Ikeda did a new Gundam thing? Would it have been The Origin? Is the last time he did a
Oh, geez. Well, it probably would have been like a McDonald's commercial or something
right,
like that.
But I mean in an actual Gundam thing. I forget if he has a line in Kukuru's Doan's Island or not. But like, and you can just... And it's just... And they're all there. And so, yeah, this is... it is a 25-year cross-section of the anime voice acting industry, which, because they also, in those original shows, cast people like Shuichi Ikeda, is going all the way back to the 70s. It's a movie where for 2 hours, you're constantly going, I know that person, I know that person, I know that person, and it's really cool.
Yeah. A couple other quick notes on the cast. One of my favorite new characters is Albert Heinlein, who's the guy voiced by Fukuyama Jun, who's like the technobabble dude on the ship. Who he's the character that they're like, we have a lot of shit to move through. So Fukuyama Jun, can you just talk about like 2 times normal speaking speed? And he just motor mouths. He's like the Micro Machine guy. It's so great. Like it's kind of off-putting at first, but then when you realize it's a very intentional choice and it's not just him trying to cram lines into the cut or something, it's very clearly a choice for the character that he just talks a million words a minute. It's very great. And then maybe the greatest thing about this fucking thing, again, that just gets the weirdness of Seed, is they once again have cast Kawashima Hoko. So Kawashima Hoko, who, this is the 3rd Gundam Seed thing she's in. This is the 4th major Gundam Seed character she has played, because she played 2 in the original Gundam Seed. She was Flay in the original, and she was Natarla, the second in command for the Archangel in the original. Then she was Stella in Seed Destiny, and now she is Agnes, who is the most like, feels like out of a Tomino Gundam, like a crazy, like not quite a Cyber New type, but almost a Cyber New type lady.
Yes.
She's in this movie. And
she has like a good 12-episode arc crammed into all of maybe 90 seconds of this movie, and it's amazing. Yes,
and it's just, I love that they're like, we have to get Kawashima in here. She's just the most iconic Seed actress. You have to have her in here. They have found a way to cram her into every Seed thing, and this is the first Seed character who's survived. All of her other characters get killed over the course of their series. And I really thought Agnes was going to get it at the end, but she lives and she survives. And I do like that, because presumably just because they have Kawashima there anyways, they're like, yeah, let's do a Stella cameo. Like, let's have a little Cyber New type ghosty Stella thing happen here, and you can have a Stella line also, because why the fuck not?
Yes. So, in terms of other people who are new to Seed, I also wanted to mention there's the captain of the ship that Albert Heinlein is on. Alexei Konoe is Hochu Otsuka. Yes. And that is just, again, that's a deep cut. Obviously, he's at 70 years old. He's been in the industry forever. But all the way back, he's Yazan in Zeta Gundam. Yes. And he has such a good... I love that character. I love how that character steps aside for Ramue near the end of the movie. I just love his whole deal. Or Murue Ramius. Her name is crazy. Yeah. And I love that it's Hochu Otsuka. It's a great voice.
Yeah, that's very good. I do like, you also have... One of the things that's fun is you do also have just a lot of, like, smaller Seed characters that pop up here and there. Like you have Arthur, who was the guy who was Talia's second in command in Seed Destiny on the main ship. And Talia dies at the end of Seed Destiny, but I like that Arthur is just there again as like the second command for the Hochu Otsuka character. He doesn't have like a big presence in the movie, but it's nice to sort of like see him there. Like Mirialia and Sai from the original show pop up in their like orb and just kind of see them briefly. I think Mirialia has like one line. And there's just a lot of little moments where you see like, oh, there's Andrew Waltfeld. He's just in the background of that scene. And I like that there's a lot of good little fan service like that with the characters. Even if they're not in a lot, you do get to see a lot of like the people, they're like out in the world. There's one shot where you see Kira's parents at that memorial in Orb, where if you're someone who really likes Gundam Seed like me, you're like, yeah, there's Kira's parents. They were in like 2 episodes of the original show. It's cool to just have, there's just like a conscientious approach to it of trying to make sure this all feels like it exists in that same world as if it was just made in 2007, where you wouldn't have just sort of forgotten about the little side characters that were important. They're all kind of there in the background as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's about it for your notes. Do you want to go ahead and jump into talking about the movie proper?
Yes, let's get in. Let's talk about Seed Freedom, but I don't even know how to talk about it because it's just, this movie just, my reaction is just, it's hype as shit. Like, that's my big take. Like, that's what you put on the box, Weekly Suit Gundam. This movie is hype as shit, and it's like, just go see it because it's so good.
I completely agree. Let's start with the elephant in the room, which is that for a 2024 anime movie, it looks fucking weird. And I say that with love. This was the hardest part back in May of my review to write, to try to express, like, I do think it takes a little bit to, like, get into this movie's rhythms again if you have not had Seed on your mind recently, because it is not a movie that was made to, like, stand up next to Kimetsu no Yaiba Mugen Train. It's not supposed to look like cutting-edge 2024 animation, and, I don't think they couldn't have done that. I think Sunrise clearly would have given them whatever resources they needed to make it whatever they wanted it to be. But so you have, the character designs are exactly like they are in the original series, to the degree that, like in the HD remasters of those shows, I don't think they really look good in HD, right? I don't think the line work quite makes sense when you are not capturing at 480p resolution. I think, like, it is very limited character animation. Like, it does, when characters are talking, their lips are the only thing moving. It is, like, very harsh, what's called slash and cut animation, where you're just animating that part. I've been watching some recent One Piece episodes this weekend, and the One Piece characters, their faces move so much more than anyone in this giant multi-million-dollar movie. But, like... Or,
look at any of the KyoAni shows we've been watching, and there's, like, a world of difference. Even for something like Clannad, which was made with the same types of character designs as Gundam Seed, and Clannad makes those work so much better, whereas this is a little bit more like Air or something like that. That's like struggling a little bit more with like making this kind of early 2000s visual novel-y character designs work in animation.
Yes, it's two things at once. It is that you have these early 2000s shoujo-coded visual novel-style character designs with their even by anime standards, crazy eyes that are, multicolored rainbows. And those are like, again, those literally come from the early days of digital animation. Those are coded to visual novels because they are the first generation of people doing stuff in a computer for anime. And it is why they are so angular. It's why they are so relatively limited in their expression. And even the new characters here, like Hiro Shimono's character, the Orphe Tam Lao, looks like he could have been in a key visual arts novel in 1999. And they're doing all of that. And when you do that today in modern HD animation, it does look weird. Now, and I think if anyone were to look at the movie and go, that's weird to me, again, you're not wrong. It is objectively weird, but it is also objectively Gundam Seed. And I think there's something about, especially on a second viewing, and I will say it works better on a TV than it did in a movie theater.
I can see that.
There's a certain logic of like seeing this on a TV than like at 50 feet high in the air of like, okay, you know what? Like, that's who these characters are. And I think part of that is my other overall thesis of the movie that we'll get into is that this movie taps back into the shoujo roots that Gundam Seed kind of was in its initial incarnation. And I think the aesthetic is just... I think the aesthetics and the themes and that genre choice are kind of all inseparable. And so... is this kind of a rough-looking movie in places by most objective 2024 standards? God, yes. There are all those parts where Kagali has her, like, new type flashes with Orphe, and her eyes become these ridiculous blue discs, and it looks like a magical girl anime from the 90s. It's ludicrous. And those moments I fucking love. It is Gundam Seed, for better or for worse, and that is part of why you just... if it takes a minute to adjust, by the end, you remember why you loved Seed initially, and I don't think that feeling would be as strong if they had tried to figure out, well, how could Kira look if we were designing him today? I don't know if Kira as a character makes sense if you were designing him today.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very much where I come down on it, where it's like, if you were to do a Seed movie today and your objective was, let's update it aesthetically to match a modern anime looks, like what would it be like, as you said, if like we designed Kira today? It's just like, I just don't think that doesn't even make sense as a thing to try to do, because there's something about Seed. It is such a show that is like, wears its heart on its sleeve. It's so emotionally affectious, right? Like, it's trying to be very raw. That the aesthetic of the show is so wrapped up in everything that it's doing. That in a way that I don't think is true of like every anime production. Like, I think there are plenty of things that you can look at and say like, well, we can update the look of this, we can evolve the look of this, and you can still retain most of just like what makes it what it is. With Seed, though, all of its influences and the time period in which it comes out is so essential to making sense of what it is. And it is that kind of the shoujo valence of it, the sort of like romantic and sexual politics of Seed that are so kind of like goopy and adolescent, and it's sort of like trying to rip at you in those ways. You know, all the stuff of like in the original Seed of Kira in his very complicated sexual relationship with Flay. There's something about the very like early to mid 2000s, you know, internet infected visual novelty art design that feels like it comes from that same place. And so him looking like something designed almost by like a teenager, like that's what these character designs always remind me of, is it feels like someone doing their art in their like high school notebook during class or whatever, and this is the characters they're designing because it's just from that time period. And obviously it's because it's when I was a kid too. So it's like, yeah, you know, when you saw like these kinds of things online.
But also literally, like, Sean, like this era that we're talking about is when you have a lot of the first era of doujin digitally yes. online, where and like all those visual novels of that era come out of that. It yes. is fans and like otaku doing those designs on the back of an envelope and then figuring out how to translate it digitally and all these things. Like there is that feeling to it that is really key to the aesthetic.
Yes, and I think this is something to me that is true of a lot of other stuff from this time period, because I would also say the same thing for something like Clannad, that if you wanted to update Clannad and like, let's do a new Clannad anime, which like, bless you if that's something you try to do, because man, that's a project that would fucking fail. But if you did that and tried to like, well, let's do the characters if they were made today and not have the like weird eccentricities of the art style of the time period when it was originally created, it's just like, it would feel so inherently wrong and alien to me, because it is essential to the very like romance, goopy element, emotional nature of the material. It all comes from this same place. And so if you wanted to do Seed, I just think you need to do the aesthetic. I just don't see what the point of doing Seed without the aesthetic would be. Is that going to be off-putting to some people? 100%. Like, it would have been off-putting to me if I didn't already like Gundam Seed. It took me a while watching Gundam Seed to sort of have the weird, whatever it is, the charm of that aesthetic work on me. I did not like Gundam Seed at first. It took me a while. Like, if you go back and listen to our podcast when we did it, Jonathan, you had the exact same experience, where I think anyone kind of coming to it for the first time later is going to have a hard time getting over the hurdle of this very particular aesthetic that existed for a small period of time at a juncture in the history of Japanese media, that it's just very weird. But once you get into it, it's like, you know, it grows on you. It's I don't know, it's like, I'm trying to think of an example of like a food, like natto or something like that. Like some weird food, like black licorice, that people, you hate it at first, but as you get used to the taste, you're like, I mean, yeah, it tastes weird, and probably I would say it tastes bad, but I can't stop eating it because, I don't know, it just tastes like what it tastes like, and it's something essential to the project. And so that's to me, what the aesthetic of Gundam Seed does. And if you want to have all the stuff they do in this movie, like have Othran beat the Nakamura Yuchi character by fantasizing about having sex with his girlfriend Kagali, and having that cutaway of her coming in and kissing the camera, like, you can't do that unless you're doing the Gundam Seed aesthetic, right? And it's one of the things that Seed Destiny, I think, fucks up at is that it goes too far away from some of those kind of plot elements and emotional structures in the plot, where Sheen just, like, they never kind of find that place with Sheen, particularly post-Stella, for that stuff. And that's one of the things that causes Seed Destiny to go off the rails in the second half, is I think it loses the ability to sort of mine some of the weird romantic drama that this aesthetic sort of enables or encourages. And this movie, it's all over it. I mean, it's the entire thing that the movie is about. It is so about the weird romantic entanglements of Kira and Lacus and how that echoes across the world. And then obviously the bad guys all involved in that. It's so seeped in that kind of melodrama. You got to have the goofy, weird teenage 2005 aesthetic to it. It has to be there.
Yeah. And like, I had a real breakthrough with the Gundam Seed aesthetic earlier, like back in January earlier this year, where I started rewatching the original series. I had gotten for Christmas the special Ultra edition that Right Stuff put out that had the Blu-rays of the HD remaster, but it also had the standard definition Blu-ray release of the original 50-episode 4x3 version of the series. And honestly, it's a 2-disc release, 25 episodes per disc. That is probably my favorite piece of Gundam physical media I own, because it is far and away the best looking version of Seed. Because what it is it is just the original 480p broadcast masters, but with a nice high bitrate on Blu-ray, not upscaled. They're not doing any of that. It is just, this is how it looked, and your TV will upscale it fine. And that is the best way for that show to look, because then you can really appreciate, okay, this is part of why it looks the way it does. Because part of why, like, SD, the standard definition anime of the time, is very angular is because it is easier to render angles than circles in that kind of, like, environment, right? And I think I started realizing, like, this is actually not... There are aesthetic limitations to that show, for sure, but it is a better animated show than I think you would appreciate if you were watching the HD remaster, which I think is awful. Yes. Or honestly, even just taking the files and having an actual, like, upscale of them through an AI algorithm or something. Like, just look at the original raw animation, and it's fine. And there is an awkwardness in this, because this is a modern HD production, and there is a certain angularity to it that looks weird in HD, because we're just not used to it. Like, one of the things that has happened over the last 20 years is anime has gone much further away from angularity, because when you have, like, a nice 2K space to work in, you can render much more complicated shapes that are more bulbous, and you've seen this in Gundam itself and stuff like Reconquista or Witch from Mercury. But yeah, but I agree with everything you're saying, and I think this is where we should just transition into talking about the story. And, like, Gundam Seed Freedom is a love story. That is the fundamental thing, I think, to say about this movie. And I think it is also one of the fundamental things about Gundam Seed. And I think it is one of the things that Gundam Seed Destiny really loses, in that it never quite figures out how to tell that story with Shinn, even though he has multiple love interests. It never for a second knows what's to do with Kira or Lacus, or how their relationship should develop. Othrin and Kagali are very sidelined in that show. But I think in the original Gundam Seed, it is, and we talked about this at the time, it is very shoujo coded. It was the first Gundam written by a woman, and it has a lot of, and it's building off of stuff that was always there in Gundam. I'm in the process, Sean, of finishing revisions on my dissertation, and in the chapter where I talk about the history of the original Gundam, I actually added about half a paragraph in my revision, just pointing out, because there was a quote I had from Tomino talking about that he was surprised at how many women watched Gundam in 1979. And that is true. It was not like a huge number on its own. It wasn't like 50-50, but it was like 20-80, and that was high for anime, particularly mecha anime of the period. And his theory was that it's because we had this sort of family drama in the white base where we really focused on people. And I don't think, and this is part of why I added this, Sean, is that when I first wrote this section, Witch from Mercury hadn't aired, and now it has. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the two most successful Gundam shows past the original Gundam are Seed and Witch from Mercury, and they are the two most aimed at women. So they have a much more diverse fan base. And so that is true, obviously, of Gundam Seed as well. And it is about relationships, it is about relationship dynamics, it is about love, it is about sex, it is about physicality. And I think the masterstroke of Gundam Seed Freedom as a script is it goes back to something that is there in the original Seed as well, which is that its themes about society are rooted in its themes about interpersonal relationships. The theme of freedom is about how you cannot force love. You know, Lacus has that line about you don't love someone because you need someone because you love them. And that is also its entire theory about like governance and what freedom is. And that is so rooted in the genre tropes that it comes out of, which is also rooted in the aesthetics. And I think that is part of why Freedom feels both cathartic as an ending to the series, but also so faithful to what Gundam Seed always was, is it because it understands how the theme, the genre, and the aesthetics all interplay into something that, you know, Gundam Seed starts out looking like original Gundam, but it ultimately is something very different because it takes that basis, but changes the generic emphasis of it. And I think that is something Freedom fully follows through and pays off on.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think one of the things about Seed Freedom that's so satisfying is that because it's such a like tightly focused 2-hour movie, it really just gets to get at the core of that idea in a way that Seed, even though I really love the original Gundam Seed, it's a messy show. Like it's got like, you know, stretches that don't entirely work. It's got, you know, it's sort of weird foibles as a 50 episode TV show, as most of those kinds of anime are. It's hard to stay on focus and on target consistently every single episode for that kind of run. And so there's something about Seed Freedom just really gets to cut to the heart of a lot of those kinds of ideas, which is that it's the way that you treat people in your life is also the way that you treat people in your society, right? And like the way that if you want, it's something honestly I've been kind of like thinking about with the current U.S. election that's coming up, and like the way that you see Trump and his relationships with people, as far as we can like determine them, in his relationship with like his wife and his children and the various women he has sexually assaulted and all that kind of stuff, versus people like a Tim Walz or Kamala Harris that seem to be in very like stable, happy, loving marriages with kids and all that kind of stuff, like with Tim Walz and his kids. There is something I think that is very true about the people in power, the way they are going to treat the people underneath them, the people that they're sort of, you know, presiding over, let's say, is going to reflect in some ways the ways that they treat the people in their daily life. And if you are someone who is not able of really understanding love between two people, how can you be expected to rule a society or dictate things about a society or guide others? Like you can't really do that. And so this philosophy presented in this movie, I think, rings so true to me, that at first you need to get your own shit in order. You need to be able to understand yourself and the people you care about. And then from there is where you build the foundation that you try to make a better world. But you can't ignore the way that you treat the people in your daily life, because the way you treat the people around you is going to reflect the ways that you treat everything. And if you're trying to build a better world or better society, but you have this rotted core of the interpersonal relationships that you maintain, you are doomed to fail. As the bad guys in this movie fail. And I think that there's something that is so, you know, it's easy to sort of like roll your eyes at like the power of love will save the day. But here it's got a much more like complex, mature way of approaching that kind of idea as a way of something it's really invested in, not just as a platitude, which is also what I would say of the original Gundam Seed. It's also the way that it approaches that in the relationship with Kira and Lacus, and what that reflects on the world that they're trying to make with each other and how they need each other to make that world. And here it's just that message is so refined and focused because it's presented in such a tight package.
100%. And like, the theme broadly sounds like, as you say, a very simplistic anime theme, but I think in the experience of the movie, it's very mature. I think the relationship Kira and Lacus have in this is one of the most mature adult-feeling Gundam romances we've ever seen. Like, an early scene of the movie is him not being able to get home on time because he's busy with the Gundam up in space, and she's making dinner. They're both, and not because she's a homemaker, this is just the night she happens to be home.
Yeah.
And it happens to be the night he's stuck in space, and so they don't get to see each other, and neither of them are mad at the other about that. It is just well, fuck, we're both adults with responsibilities. And honestly, like, that one scene, Sean, is what Destiny is missing. Because Seed Destiny does this weird thing where you come out of Gundam Seed, the first show, thinking Kira and Lacus are going to be so active in shaping the future, and then they are not. and they are weird hermit people, and you don't know what they're doing. And in this, it is the strain on their relationship is that it is tough to engage with society and keep up an adult, loving partnership, but it takes compromises and sacrifices. And, the jealousy they feel at different points in the movie is kind of ugly and sad to see, but feels very real. And in the scene that I also wanted to stand up and cheer at, where Othran just punches the fucking shit out of Kira in what I feel like is catharsis for Gundam Seed Destiny, what Kira is saying there is also ugly and sad in his defeatism, but it also feels very honest in the way people sometimes just lose faith in other people and in ideals. And then the way that pays off in the insane maximalism of the climax, there is a maturity to it. I mean, I wrote about this in my review, Sean, but the thesis statement of the movie is delivered in a scene where the villain tries to sexually assault Lacus. And I think that is one of the riskiest things I've ever seen Gundam do, because, any kind of sexual assault scene you have to do with a certain amount of sensitivity and grace, because it's a hard thing to depict and not have people, I think, kind of shut down watching it. And instead, the point of that, it kind of has to be that. And I think it's part of why we think about, you and me, our leaders here, because, hey, one of the two people running for president is an adjudicated rapist. And a court of his peers have said that. And, it is significant that the lead of this movie is, or the lead villain of this movie is someone who thinks he is entitled to sex, he is entitled to another woman's body, and it is Lacus, scared but as strongly as she can say, being like, whatever you do to me does not change the fact that love cannot be forced, and that this is wrong, and that if this is your approach to me and my body in this moment, you will fail as a leader in the larger world. And I think, that to me is where you can also see how smart the movie is, because it knows it kind of has to go to that point. And when it does that, it is going to use it to deliver the key idea of the movie. And that's what I mean by, as insane and maximalist as parts of this movie are, and as hallucinogenic as it is also, I think, a very mature, down-to-earth version of these themes.
Yeah, and it's just also, it's nice to have a Gundam thing again that is so sort of frank about addressing sex, which is one of those things that's great about the original Gundam Seed. Because, so much of the Gundam, at least the TV stuff, for understandable reasons in various places, it's going to avoid broaching that directly. And we'll get at it from a more roundabout, symbolic way. Obviously, sex is a very present thing in a lot of Tomio's Gundam stuff, but not in a way that is explicit. It's just more sort of it's in the vibes, almost. Whereas here it's no, sex is a thing that exists that these people do, and it's it is a fact of this world. It is a complicating element in these interpersonal relationships that represents both the greatest act of love, but also this act of violence being forced upon someone or attempted to be forced upon someone, and how that represents and reflects the various themes. And it's just nice to have something that, again, takes that same energy that the original Gundam Seed had with Kira's relationship with Flay, and how that just broached a kind of area that Gundam was never able to go to anywhere else. And this movie is able to do those same things.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it is funny how it, as you said at the beginning, Sean, this is a sequel to Destiny. All the stuff that happened in Destiny happened. It does not do any kind of retconning, but it is also a redux of the story of Destiny, yes. Right? And it is I think I called it a mulligan in my review. And that is because it takes all those same ideas. Durandal is dead, but his ideas live on. And they also, I like, one of the things they do early on is they live on in Kira. Kira still has this internal doubt over, because Kira's whole thing is he wants there to be peace, and he is uncomfortable with the necessity of violence to maintain that. He wonders if Durandal was right. And then you have this faction led by Orphi Lam Tao and his people who want to instill the Destiny plan. And so those themes that are very potent in Gundam Seed Destiny, but just never followed through on, get to have a full expression here. And it's why Destiny could have been a great show, because you see this movie and it's yeah, those are the right ideas for a sequel to Gundam Seed. It's not exactly what the villains of Seed wanted, but it is the evil version of the Kira ideology of sort of the pacifism of well, what if you just made people pacifist? What if you made people based on their genes only do what you wanted them to do? And I think it's expressed really, really well here. And in part because, as you said earlier, it's a 2-hour concentrated package. It feels like that expression just gets to be very focused.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of those aspects of the mulligan here that we're going to talk about as well is Kira and Lacus, because if there are two characters done dirty by Seed Destiny, the big one is Kira, like that's the biggest one by far, but then also Lacus. And it was just so frustrating in Seed Destiny that it felt like in order to try to give space for Shinn, they sort of throw Kira into the background for a long time, and then they decide, well, we want to bring him back in, but then what was he doing if he wasn't involved? And it's very much like kind of like the modern Luke Skywalker thing from like Force Awakens, where, well, we just can't have him be around because he's too powerful, and if he's around, he controls everything. So yeah, he's fucked off to an island somewhere. I don't know. But then it's like them trying to bring him back. It just makes Kira as this confused mess of a character in Seed Destiny. And here, where Kira is in this movie, just feels like that's the biggest mulligan of like, this is just what they should have done in Seed Destiny. This is the position Kira and Lacus should have been in. They are two of the most important people at maintaining the peace post the events of Gundam Seed. But maintaining that peace is exhausting and taxing and confusing, because it's like, it's one thing to try to end a war. It's another thing to try to build a world that's not going to have another war. And that is a different kind of fight that doesn't have an ending. That is an infinite battle that Kira and Lacus have now signed up for, which is, of course, like the infinite battle that we all have in trying to like maintain a better world, even when there's not necessarily a like event that you're trying to put an end to. We need to sign a treaty to end this war. It's a lot more complicated when it's like, well, no, we just need to try to like protect the rights of people and, reduce income inequality and, fight for gender equality and all those kinds of things that are just sort of like the normal everyday issues that we are trying to improve in our society. And that's just not something that is just done. It's not a fight that is over. And so it's so relatable to have Kira and Lacus struggling to be like, how do we proceed with this? Like, what do we do? How do we make things better? How do we maintain this peace? And will it ever be over? Because they are being like ripped apart with like how exhausted they are. In that scene, really great scene you pointed out earlier about them both missing each other when they come home. And it is such a great place to bring those two characters, especially for Kira, where my big thesis for Kira has always been that he is Gundam Superman. Like, that is fundamentally what he is as a character. He is by far the most powerful character. He is like basically unstoppable. If Kira is on his shit, you cannot do anything to this guy. He is just unstoppable. But there is a limit to what his strength can accomplish. And that is like any great Superman story. That is the drama you explore, is what are the limits of Superman's powers? Because there are problems that Superman can't solve by punching them. So it's like, yeah, if a bad guy shows up and he knows that's the bad guy, yeah, Superman can beat him up or put him in jail or whatever. But what is the bigger problem that you're trying to solve? And what is your life as you're trying to like fight that fight? And how do you maintain the relationships in your life while you're trying to fight that fight without losing sight of yourself? And they hit all like a bunch of major Superman beats with Kira in this movie that made me very happy that they did, with one of the biggest ones being, well, if you've got a Superman level dude who's just seemingly unstoppable, what's the first thing you do? You have the bad guys like mind control him somehow. That's like every other fucking Superman story. And you do that, you confuse him to make it unclear who are the enemies and that kind of stuff. And then once you know who the bad guys are, beating them is not really a problem. And that's one of the satisfying things about the ending of the movie is it's like, once we know who the bad guys are, we can absolutely fuck their shit up and just dismantle everything they're trying to do. The struggle is trying to know where is the problem, and trying to sort of like maintain ourselves while we're fighting this fight. Like, that's the difficulty. And I really love that they find that place for Kira and Lacus and explore that territory of his insecurities and her insecurities around their relationship with each other as they are sort of like working themselves to their breaking point.
Yes, absolutely. The Superman comparison is good. I was also thinking, because this is also a Superman archetype character, but of Cosmic Kiryu in the Yakuza games. Mm-hmm. Like, it is a very similar archetype to that, too, right? Where it's like, yes, this is the person who, if you put him in the room with the bad guy, it's over. But it honestly reminds me of different Kiryu stories I've seen from those games, of where, like, the real struggle is in the build up to that, is in figuring out like what is the landscape in front of you, all of those sorts of things. And yeah, it is a reminder that Kira Yamato is like, he's a very unique Gundam protagonist in that way. And I think this, and like Soichiro Hoshi's performance is a very unique performance of a Gundam hero. And it is just very satisfying to get to see that done right again. And of course, the flip side of that is Lacus too, and having Lacus be the politician and be the one who is trying to make the tough decisions and all of the like stuff that she's dealing with all the stuff you can't punch, right? She's dealing with all the stuff you can't solve in a mobile suit. And Rie Tanaka, she's the star of this movie to me. She's fucking phenomenal. I mean, she gets literally the final words of the series at the end of the movie. But it's just, Lacus is someone who enters the story a little later in the original Gundam Seed, is fucked up in Destiny, and it is very nice to see this movie. She is like the co-lead with Kira for all 2 hours, and that is, and like the musical soundtrack really emphasizes that and how they use her themes, and it's very cool to see. Yeah,
it's a great performance. I've always really loved Lacus's character, and it's nice to see here them maintaining that with her, and the like. As I say, like, she is trying to deal with the problems that you can't solve by throwing a mobile suit at them. And as part of, like, the thing, the strain in the relationship between her and Kira, right, is you have that little picnic scene between them where she's trying to, like, talk to him about this mission that they're going to go on and all that kind of stuff to find this, like, Michael guy or whatever, like this sort of, like, terrorist organization with Blue Cosmos that's sort of a leftover from Seed Destiny. And Kira's doesn't really offer much of an opinion on like what they should or shouldn't do. He's just like, hey, like if going and fighting there will help end this thing, like I will go do it. And he on one hand, he's sort of just putting his faith in Lacus, but what he's really doing is pushing that responsibility onto Lacus, and then Lacus can't help but feel that she is pushing the entire responsibility of the physical fight onto Kira. And instead of sharing that burden and they each taking like part of that load and working together on it, it's really they have like segmented themselves into 2 different halves of this fight, and they're just sort of like ping-ponging the responsibility back and forth between the 2 of them, which is what's putting that incredible strain, and they can't actually meet in the middle and cooperate, which is obviously what will lead to like how they're used in the big climax. But it's a great way to sort of have these 2 people who struggle tremendously in the first half of this movie, sometimes make decisions that are very heartbreaking, like Lacus making the choice to say, like, okay, target Kira when he has sort of lost his mind and is going to break the rules and go across the boundary to that other country. Like that's a really harsh choice that is made, but they are able to walk that line of having these characters make a mistake. They are kind of messy emotionally without feeling like they've been turned to idiots or morons. And that is the Seed Destiny problem, is that they just feel like fucking idiots for so much of that show, who have no idea what they're trying to do or how they're going to try to do it. They just are sort of like talking philosophically about something, and then they just waffle around about it and fuck up constantly. Whereas here, it's like they don't know how to accomplish the incredibly insane idealistic goal they have in front of them, but they are capable people doing their best to try to get there. And that is like the line you need to walk with a character like Kira and Lacus.
And it is, their whole relationship is so well mirrored in the villains and what their whole plan is.
Yeah.
Because obviously what you just described of what Kira and Lacus are dealing with is this idea that they have different roles and they don't quite know how to have those roles meet. And what, Orphe and his whole faction are arguing for is that never shall those roles meet. We are going to encode it on your genes, and that's it. And everyone's going to have their specified place in the world, and that's how it's going to work. And they are trying to, Kira and Lacus are trying to fight for something that is much more about the gray areas. And it is not an accident that this movie ends with them literally naked in the ocean embracing, because there is something, cathartic and sexual about that, and that they're finally here, but it is also that they are finally literally meeting as bodies. Everything else is stripped off, and there is a way to meet, and it is tied up in love. Again, I think this is such a good script. This is such a good story. It is something where I feel like every level of it is a big rushing nesting doll of themes and aesthetics and character dynamics that all kind of feed off one another in a way that makes it, it's a crazy screenplay. There's a lot that happens in this movie, but it's actually very teachable, I think, about how you can layer, theme and character and action and aesthetic and, villainous motivation and all these things in a really effective way.
Absolutely. While we're talking about some of like our characters and mulligans from Seed Destiny, let's talk about our boy, Shinn. Oh, Shinn, I love you. I love you, my boy. And they did him so dirty And oh my God, this movie, it's so nice having him be like, he's like happy and he's with Luna Maria and he's just like, gosh darn it, he's trying to do his best and working with Kira. And, you know, he is obviously not like the primary focus of the film, but I do really like the choice of having him be Kira's right-hand guy rather than Othran, right? They save Othran for like the big mid-movie, like, Othran is like the Piccolo of this movie, if you're doing the Dragon Ball Z movie comparison, right? He gets to come in the big dramatic moment and sort of like set things right and then, you know, go off for the big fight at the end. But Shinn is the one who gets a lot more of that screen time sort of trying to support Kira and struggling to do it. And I really love the sort of like relationship between him and Kira that's sort of implied here. And Kira having this awkwardness of him not knowing how to be a good like mentor to Shinn, right? He's struggling with this. Kira, in a very Superman-esque way, is putting everything on his own shoulders. He's only really trusts himself because he knows that he can get the job done. And he struggles with letting other people have that level of responsibility because he's afraid of giving that control up to somebody else. But Shinn is just this like eager puppy dog right next to him, just wanting to do everything he can, just waiting for, you know, his master to say like, yeah, like, go, good job, boy, like, go get him. And when you get that little moment and he just says like, hey, I'm trusting you, like, look after the ship while I'm gone. And the way that Shinn's eyes light up, it's so great. To just see that character get to have that kind of development where it feels like Seed Destiny just pushed him into such just an unpleasant place in the last third of that show, where he gets effectively turned into a bad guy and he gets his ass kicked by Kira in the ending, and he's just crying on the fucking moon, just where his whole show has just been fucking cuckolded right from out under his feet by the protagonist of the previous show. And it's just like, what the fuck has even happened here? Because he was such a good character and he's such an interesting Gundam protagonist for so much of that series, and then it just all goes to shit in the last section. And this feels like a really great kind of, you know, partly course correction, partly it is obviously an extension of the ending of Seed Destiny that they flash back to, of them shaking hands and stuff. But it also feels a little bit like this is what Seed Destiny could have done at a certain point about 2/3 of the way through, is had Shinn and Kira come together and have a meeting of the minds and then have them both work together to fight Durandal, which would have been a more conventional ending, but a much better ending to Seed Destiny than the direction that they actually went in. And just having Shinn say Kira-san and putting the san on Kira's name, it's just like, that's all you need to know about their relationship, and it's fucking great, and I love it.
Well, you know, here's the thing with Seed Destiny. I never disliked the idea of Shinn starting as protagonist and becoming antagonist. Like, there's something interesting and subversive about that if you did it right.
Yeah.
And there are definitely moments in the later half of Destiny where I think that is done interestingly, where he gets motivations that are interesting to play. The problem is that his ending is, as you say, crying on the moon, and he has no role in the actual climax of the show. And then what feels like a very limp ending with Kira offering his hand, and it's like, well, this is too little too late. And one of my favorite moments in this whole movie, Sean, you just referenced it, is when he is on the Archangel and he's talking about his motivations, and they're asking him, like, why are you so obsessed with Kira-san? And he says, well, because Kira offered me his hand and asked me to join him. And we get a Fukuda flashback to that moment in standard definition. And, like, I think it's actually a really effective way of recasting what is, I think, a very limp noodle ending to Seed Destiny and making it a core motivation here of, like, it's the start of Shinn's arc in this movie, which is that he needed something to believe in. He needed something where he could be offered to, like, do good in the world. Because Shinn's whole journey in Destiny is something horrible happens to him at the beginning, worse than anything Kira experienced, and then he's trying to figure out, how do I move through this world having lived through that? And he is never quite offered that chance until literally the moment it cuts to credits at the end of the series. And now we have him living in that reality where he feels like he has been directed in something he can believe in a productive fashion, and he's willing to fight for it. But he also feels like Kira is at a distance from him. And so it's a very small arc in some ways, going from Kira being unsure of how to deal with Shinn to at the end being like, hey kid, you take care of the Archangel. But, like, that's everything for Shinn. That is all the way to, like, he knows how much Kira cares about these people. He knows how important a job this is. And once Kira gives him that, absolutely fucking nothing is going to stop him. And he basically says that to the villains when they come, all the Black Angels come up to him and he's like, fuck you guys. I was in a bad mobile suit last time. Now I'm in the Destiny. You guys can't do shit. And he and his ghost girlfriend fuck them up. And it's great. Yep. And it is like a complete 180 from the crying on the moon ending from Destiny. But, it does not justify every creative decision of Destiny, but it makes it a lot easier to swallow when you have this as the end point. And it's great. I also like his relationship with Luna Maria, and I like how it feels very kind of... It's less adult than like Kira and Lacus, because they're younger people, but there is something like playful and mature about two people who are comfortable with each other. I love the moment near the end when he tries to sneak up on her in his like weird the sneaking onto the ship costume, and she kicks the shit out of him, and then he takes it. I was like, it's me, and she's like, you idiot. And I just love that, like, she loves Shinn not in spite of him being a little bit of a doofus, but because he is a little bit of a doofus.
Yes, because that's the whole resolution of that sort of little plot line with the Kashima Hoko character, where, it's like Luna Maria and Shinn are clearly, if you know their characters, they are in a romantic relationship, but it is not, like, as obvious on screen as it is with, like, Kira and Lacus. And so I think you have that whole situation where Agnes is sort of like, oh, why are you, like, she thinks they're just sort of, like, flirting around. It's just like, oh, what do you do? You don't actually like him. And she's like, no, I like him. I like that idiot. It's like, yeah, you like that dumbass? It's like, yeah, I like that dumbass. Fuck you. What about it? And it's such a great little moment where it's like, it's just he's a fucking little idiot, but look at him. He's great. You gotta love this kid. And it's great that it's like, this movie gets to make me feel like I just get to embrace that I like Shinn rather than having to think about the Indigo Sea Destiny, whatever I think about this character. Yes. I get to think about moments like that of Luna Maria just being like, yeah, I love that dumbass. Like, fuck you. Like, what are you going to do about it? And it does add a nice little extra spice that the voice actors for those two characters met on that show in Sea Destiny and now have been married for like 10 years or something. It's a nice little fun little behind the scenes thing that makes it even more adorable to me.
100%. But, like, this is a broader thing I wanted to talk about, because you said the thing you were talking about, Shinn is not, like, the focus of the movie. Othrin is kind of used like Piccolo. It's another strength of this script to me, is that it is very clear Kira and Lacus are the leads, and they are the leads from the beginning to the end. But then I think everybody beneath them, and again, this movie has a ludicrously enormous cast. Like, if you were to, I wonder just how many speaking parts are in this movie. It has to be some kind of Gundam record for a 2-hour production, because it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's huge.
But I feel like every character under Kira and Lacus is used correctly. Like, whatever that size is, like Kagali only has a couple of scenes, but even putting the weird voice actor drama aside, I'm not sure what you could do with Kagali that would honor her arc of becoming, like, the political leader of Orb in a better way than what they do here with the story they're trying to tell. I think it's the right use of Kagali. Othrin doesn't come in for an hour, but it is 100% the right use of Othrin. He is the person who has to come in and punch the shit out of Kira to get him out of his funk and pay him back for Destiny a little bit, And I think it's everybody down that line is just used in the right amount. Like, we get just enough of Mula Flaga to remember why he's awesome, but not enough to remember that he survived a thermonuclear explosion at the end of Seed and then came back as a Char clone in Destiny. We don't need to remember any of that. Just enough that he was cool and he and Ramius love each other.
I do have to say, when Mu popped up on screen, I paused for a second to be like, now where did we... Right, he got his memory back. Right. Yes. Okay, so he survived, but then he was Noah Roanoke or fucking whatever, and then he was he was really the Stella kids, but then he got his memory back and he's with Ramius. Like, okay, and then I started playing the movie again, because that Mula Flaga has the weirdest path as a character to get to this movie, but that's one of those things that the movie is smart to not dwell on at all. It's like, they just don't think about it.
That's what I mean. Like, you just not enough time for you to remember the stupid parts of Mula Flaga, just enough to go, is he the person I want blowing up the big space laser? Yes, he is, because he's cool. And do that. And then, like, Izak and Dirka, are they the focus of the movie? Absolutely not. Am I glad that they get a little moment to, like, tell the other plant general, like, you're wrong for trying to create war, and we are also coordinators, but we think this is, like, yes, they're the right people for that moment, and that thematic beat. And it's just down the list. Everybody in the movie, even some of the new characters, like, is Shura Serpentine the most detailed new character in the movie? No. But am I glad he's there, and he's voiced by Yuichi Nakamura, and he gets to be the mini-boss that Othrin kills at the end? Yes, I am. Like, I feel like it is a movie that is... It is a crazy, busy movie, but I think it has a certain kind of, like, nice clockwork precision to how all the pieces are used, and that it never lets itself lose focus on, this time we're telling Akira Lacus' story, but we can do that and have everyone else in the right positions for that. And that's one of the problems with Destiny, is it never knew whose story is it telling. This knows exactly what it's doing.
Yeah, and it is one of the things about this movie that just the screenplay is so impressive at how it balances all those elements, because Mu is, like, I think the perfect example of this, where he's not a focus at all, right? He's very much a background character, and yet, you know, you have to obviously have seen the shows and understand what his whole deal is as a character and not think too much about the Destiny side of that, but of the original Gundam Seed and his relationship with Ramius. But it all, like, he has so many good little moments in this movie that stick out in my mind. Like when they go to the Foundation for the first time and he looks at that Black Knights group and he's like, they're kind of weird, right? Like, they don't really seem like they're a military organization, which of course they aren't, because they're all like 14-year-old kids who've been grown out of a fucking test tube. But he's the first person to sort of start planting the seeds of that suspicion, which makes sense, because that's, I feel like Mu would be really perceptive of that. Also, in his previous life as Noah Roanoke, or whatever the fuck that dude's name was, he was the one in charge of the weird cyber new type kids that were like the Black Knights, so maybe that's also setting off some sensors in the back of his head. You've got the whole thing where when the Archangel gets blown up in the big middle action scene of the movie, he comes in and brings Captain Ramius, and, like, they get on his in his Gundam and fly away, and he puts the little helmet on Ramius, which is adorable, and they go away, which is a great little moment. Then he blows up the big space laser, and one of the other, like, for me, like, pump my fist moments was I forgot this was even his catchphrase until he said it, but he says the thing that's like, oh man, it sure is exhausting being the man that makes the impossible possible. I'm like, yes, yeah, fuck yeah, Mulaflaga, you rule, your big fucking stupid shiny gold Yakushiki-esque mobile suit and all this shit. Oh my god, I love him. I love Mu. And then you get the great scene in the ending credits section where he comes back on the ship and he and Ramius have, like, this big affectionate, like, sexualized kiss with each other on the bridge of the ship. It's like, yes, like, is Mulaflaga only in, like, really 4 or 5 big scenes in the movie? Yes, but every single little moment that character has stands out a lot. And if you love Mulaflaga from the original Gundam Seed, you will love what Mulaflaga gets in this film and be really excited when he gets his big moments. And I just think that's true of everybody. Like, that's true of Ramius, where she has a bunch of really great moments. She just gets to, you know, I mean, Kunomitsu, she is amazing, and I just want to hear her be the captain of a ship and shout, like, turn starboard and, like, fire all cannons. I just want her to shout all that stuff. But she's got all these great little moments, and then, like, hatching the plans and her commanding the ship. Izak has his big moments. Like, every character has a really clear 2 or 3 moments in the movie that you can kind of pin that stands out so well. And it is just, that balance is crazy. I don't understand how they were able to do that when they had a whole 50-episode TV show and see Destiny that was not able to do that. And this 1 2-hour film finds these little minute-long beats for every single character to really stand out to you.
I mean, I do think, like, as much as we've said, like, this feels like the movie they would have released in 2007, you do have to wonder how much the 20 years of working on it just meant that, like, by the time anyone put pen to paper to animate this thing, I mean, Mitsuo Fukuda had been thinking about this for 20 years. Like, yes. And Chiaki Morosawa, you know, through her illness, had probably been working on that treatment or script or whatever that whole time. And, like, I think you can feel it, because it's not just all those moments are good, but, like, again, it is that Kira and Lacus are the main characters. The theme of the movie is about that that kind of conflagration between interpersonal relationships and how you kind of structure a society, and all those things reflect on that. Like, the Ramius-Mulaflaga relationship, part of what it's doing is that there is this deep trust between these 2 people who love each other and work together, and they are kind of like a more mature Kira and Lacus, where they've found they have a very easy working relationship there, and they're the couple who come back on the bridge and kiss, and, like, I feel like it's all coming from the top. I think everyone is used in a way where, like, none of these moments feel like fan service to me. Like, is it fan service when Mulaflaga says the thing about I make the impossible possible? Of course it is. But it doesn't just feel like that, because I think it's not just their, role in the plot, but I also think where they are thematically slotted in. Same with Othrin, and all of these characters. And that is where the script just feels like, I think it had a lot of spit and polish over the years because they had time to think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. It feels so refined, that just so incredibly precise that every single character has their spot, their little role that they fit. And not only do they fit their role, but they get that little extra moment to shine on top of it. That's very, very impressive.
One performance we haven't gotten to talk about enough yet, Sean, and here's an actor they wouldn't have been able to use if they made this in 2007, and that is Mr. Hiro Shimono as Orphelam Tao. What great casting, and against typecasting. I feel like Shimono is, to me, I mean, obviously Zenitsu from Demon Slayer is his most famous role, but, like, it's that kind of character. It's someone who is a little kind of noble but silly is kind of how I think of the Hiro Shimono character. And here he is, a despicable piece of shit. But he is someone who can, like, do the shit-eating grin politician thing. He can smile as nuclear bombs are going off on Earth and all of this stuff. It's such a good performance. It's such a good use of that character. It's such a cool way, like, Seed continues up to its ending now to, like, bring in the best talent of the day. I love it.
Yeah, because it's a great piece of casting, because I feel like Hiro Shimono always plays very, like, good guy, heroic type characters. It's very rare that he plays a villain. He does every now and then. He's got, like, that Dobby character on My Hero Academia, and that's a very interesting performance. I only ever saw a little bit of that character, but because I stopped at season 3, but it was a very good performance. That was kind of like this, where it's like against type. But here, what they're doing is they're, like, leaning into the fact that he plays good guys all the time, to make it feel like, you can see how other people would look at Tao and see this big noble leader that you want to get behind, and he, like, talks a good talk at the big party and all that kind of stuff, when you as an audience obviously, like, know immediately that this guy is up to some shit, because there's the weird mind control with Lacus as soon as they meet for the first time. But you can see how in other people's eyes, they're not going to realize that yet. And then slowly, as the layers get peeled back on this guy, as with all of the villains, you see that they are just these, they're children. They're all children. They're children that, like, want the world handed to them on a silver platter, that think that they deserve to just be given everything that they want or need, and don't have to work for any of it, because that's what the Destiny plan promises them. And I think my favorite thing about the bad guys in this movie is that they are only effective when nobody knows that they're the bad guys. It's the only moment in the movie where they're, like, good at what they're trying to do and, like, achieve their goals is in that big middle action scene where they're able to mind control Kira. They organize this whole big crazy conspiracy. They get the nukes launched. They cut Lacus off from all of her kind of supports. And that's only works because nobody was expecting them to be the bad guys. As soon as everyone knows they're the bad guys, they just fuck their shit up. They like that whole last 40 minutes is the good guys methodically, piece by piece, taking every little piece that the bad guys had built up and just ripping it to shreds and fooling them and making absolute morons of them. Like, one of my favorite little moments with that is, like, Kira, when they're going to nuke Orb with the laser, Kira gets on the radio call and just shouts, like, tells them, like, hey, you idiots, I'm alive. Like, you suck ass, is basically what he tells them, like, oh, fuck you. And
he's taunting them, yeah.
He taunts them to get them to try to change their target. And I thought that was, like, a super clever way to keep Orb from not getting fucking lasered to oblivion, which would have been a pretty fucked up thing to do in your Seed Freedom movie. It would have been a bummer for Orb to be gone. It was a clever way to get them to, like, yes, like, that will work for these people, because things not going their way is completely anathema to their entire worldview, which is a really, like, terrible attitude to have. It's going to make you incredibly infectual if you are not able to sort of deal with the reality that you're going to fail. And for them, failure is not an option, because failure should not exist in the world of the Destiny plan. If everything is preordained by their genetics, it should be impossible for them to fail. And if you are someone that sees things that way and thinks that that's the way the world works and you should just be given success in what you need to you, people who have actually had to work hard for what they have are going to fuck your shit up, because they know what to do. Then they know how to deal with failure. They know how to grow from that failure. And so the whole last 40 minutes is them taking every little piece. They get Lacus. Getting Lacus out of that fucking space station is child's play. They barely have to try to do it. And then they wipe out every last thing. They blow up the giant space laser. They defeat their Zaft fleet that they got with that one general. Every single thing the bad guys try to do gets completely dismantled in about half an hour in the most thorough, satisfying way possible. And it feels so satisfying because it's such a natural extension from how the bad guys have been characterized, particularly in the Tao character with Hiroshima, where you see how everything about them that's impressive is only skin deep. And as soon as you get past that, they've got fucking nothing to back it up, and they are just incompetent little children, as also like embodied by their leader, the Tamara Yukari character, who is a woman who has like de-aged herself to being a literal child, presumably out of vanity. They don't explore that point very much, but you can just look at that character, know that she used to be an adult, and be able to draw every connection you need to about how she got to this point and what makes her like pathetic and ineffectual.
And again, it all ties back to some of those main themes, because like what makes Kira feel lesser when he sees Orphe with Lacus, it is this very surface level, skin deep. He looks like a prince. She looks like a princess. I don't. I feel like, insecure here, right?
Yeah.
And it's part of what Othran has to punch out of him at that midpoint in the movie is like, you're just seeing the surface of these people and you're just seeing the surface of yourself. And what does he say when he gets in the room with, I think it's Agnes, or not Agnes, it's
Ingrid.
Ingrid, yeah. It's Ingrid, the Sumire Uesaka character, who has the gun on Kagali and is like, how can you love her? You're not supposed to. Destiny plan, blah, blah, blah. And he says, nah, I love Lacus. I love everything about Lacus. And I think what he means there is that I love the actual woman in this room. I love the person. I don't love the idea of Lacus. You love the idea of Lacus. Orphe loves the idea of Lacus. I know the person and I love that person. And that's what it's all about. And it's why these people, as you were saying, are able to dismantle their shit, because they've had to look at themselves and they've had to know each other as people and they've had to go beyond the skin deep stuff. I mean, the entire arc of the original Gundam Seed is to start with a conflict that looks intractable in the way the original Gundam Civil War from Gundam 79 is intractable, and for the characters to say, we're abandoning our sides and we're going to fight both of them and we're going to tear up the playbook. And characters who have done that are very effective against these villains.
Yes, yeah, and that scene you're talking about with Ingrid, like the thing that's really it's such a great scene, because that's also where that one insert song starts playing. And what Ingrid says is like, if I poke out her eyes and make her blind, if I slit her throat and make it so she cannot sing, will you still love her? And yeah, then like Kira says, like, yes, even if she is blind, like, yes, even she cannot sing, because even without those things, Lacus is still Lacus. And it's such a great little piece of writing there. And it's such a powerful, like, sort of admission from Kira that he's able to sort of come out and say those things, which are things that I think we obviously know that he believes in his heart, but because of how hard he has been pushing himself through the whole first half of the movie and how distant they had grown between Kira and Lacus, both in their like dogged pursuit of this grand ideal that both of them feel like they're failing to live up to, that neither of them are able to be that intimate and open with the other. And so it's in that moment that Kira is able to like let those guards down, and then it saves Lacus and embraces her, and then that obviously is the thing that then plants the seed in Ingrid, that she can love Tao, right? Like, you can love the person you love as well, even if that is not what is preordained by the fucking destiny plan. And not only is that okay, that is what you should do. And if you people had been able to do that, none of this shit would have happened in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good stuff. And then it is all expressed through some of the most batshit insane but also carefully choreographed mobile suit action we have ever seen from this franchise.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Sean, there are basically three major, like, axes of action in this movie. There's the opening sequence where they're fighting Blue Cosmos. There's the middle section where they're in Eurasia and Kira crosses the line and everything goes to hell. And then there is the, like, 40-minute finale. is some of the best. Is some of the best that's ever happened in Gundam. It's some of the most delirious. I said in on Twitter the other night, it feels like old classic Tomino action scenes took a bunch of cocaine and it's just moving at like 3x speed, and it's throwing out crazy ideas left and right. But there is also like a very clear narrative and causal logic to everything that happens. It is blink and you'll miss it at times. It rewards, second and third and fourth viewings. It is fucking spectacular.
I think it's like an absolutely virtuosic action climax.
Yes.
Like, it is unbelievable. Because all that stuff we've been saying about, like, every character has their part and they get their moment to shine, like, that is the most true in this huge action set piece at the end. There's so many moving pieces. There's so many characters involved, and everybody gets a big moment. And it definitely is like, I mean, the thing it reminds me of is the like two-parter at the end of Gundam Seed. Like, it's very, like, that two-parter is able to do something very similar. But here there's something nice about having it all focused into one big contiguous sequence at the end of this, like, bigger movie, because the two-part at the end of Seed is also chunked up a little bit more. You have some stuff that, like, where they're not necessarily the mobile suits and they're fighting Raul Cruz on foot and stuff like that. Whereas here, it just all gets to feel like you're seeing this huge, large-scale, multi-phase space battle from all these different angles involving multiple different factions, because you've got the overall bad guys, but then you also have the Zaft fleet from that one renegade general, and then on the good guys side, you've got, like, Lacus is in one place, you've got our like the Millennium ship that has split up into multiple different factions with Shinn and Luna Maria, and then you also have obviously Kira and Asen that are doing their thing, and then Mula Flaga goes on his mission, and it's part of the thing that's satisfying is also what I was talking about the systematic dismantling of the entire plan that the bad guys have. There's something about that being the organizing philosophy of the action scene makes it so satisfying and easy to follow, because you saw all the pieces get set up just moments before. You saw, oh, here's all of our range of the sort of like lieutenant level characters with the Black Knights. Here's our like higher up from those. They've got their big giant space laser, which we need to take out. They also have this fleet they got from Zaft. Like, how do you deal with all these problems? And then they just systematically deal with every single one in the most efficient way possible, tricking and evading and deceiving the enemy at every single possible opportunity, from Othran being the one piloting the Freedom Gundam at first, to Mula Flaga like getting in front of the big cannon thing and blowing up the relay that it needs to fire, to Kira and crew sneaking in through the force field to get into the base to save Lacus when Shura Serpentine comes flying out to go fight Othran. Like, all those little pieces, the plan and the execution of it is so clever and satisfying to see, like, how competently they execute every single piece of it. And then on top of that, you have the incredibly maximalist over-the-top Gundam action as the battle ramps up, with your characters, particularly with like Shinn and Kira, getting these absolutely insane moments where they do things that are on a scale that you have never seen another Gundam character do, other than maybe some of the stuff in like Unicorn Gundam, and in that realm that gets pretty fucking crazy. And that way of just like every single piece working absolutely perfectly, every single character getting a moment to shine, and then the ramping up of the degree of the action as you get to this insane operatic finale, and it all being centered around these themes at the same time. It's so good, and it's so mind-boggling, because you see so many movies that try to have these kinds of big finales, particularly like Hollywood, that absolutely fuck it up every turn of the way. Like, one of the ones that this made me think about, that I think is a movie that wanted to have a finale like this and just couldn't figure out how to do it, is Rogue One, a Star Wars story, that has this giant crazy space battle while you have all of your characters on Earth trying to like do their like ground battle to get the Death Star plans and all that. But the problem was that, well, none of the characters are involved in the space battle. So you don't have any person you care about to sort of pin this sector of the battle to, or that phase of the battle to. And that's one of the things that this does so well, is wherever you are, there's one or two people you care about that is the focal point for this little action set piece. And so even though it's this huge sprawling massive war scene with so many different fronts involved and different like kind of operations in the plan, every single one is pinned to different characters that you care about, that get big moments, that are like resolutions to their character arcs throughout the film. It's just absolutely masterful.
100%. Virtuosic is the word I used in my review as well. And I also the other night was thinking about just how many bad Hollywood action scenes I've watching the end of this, because this movie, it was, probably pretty big budget by Gundam movie standards. It almost certainly cost less than the catering budget of literally any given Marvel movie, and there is more spectacle in the last 40 minutes of this movie than all 30-some Marvel movies put together. It's like, and there's more characterization in the spectacle than all 30-some Marvel movies put together. It's like, we are so living on fucking scraps in Hollywood. Once in a while we will get a George Miller movie every decade, and that'll be the thing we live on for the next 10 years, or a John Wick movie or something. And in the meantime, we get fucking garbage. And over here is Gundam Seed, Freedom, doing the best of the best, and doing it with a verve and a speed. It's just insane. There are parts of this that I really like. Honestly, if this had come out in time, this would have been in chapter 3 of my dissertation, where I talk about the integration of CG into anime, because it's doing some crazy stuff. I do not have time to do that now. Obviously, after theaters, I couldn't have worked with it because I didn't have a copy of it to look at. But I do a lot of frame by frame analysis in that chapter, and there are parts of this that would scare me to go frame by frame through, because there are parts where I think in less than a second of film, in less than 24 frames, you're doing just whole crazy massive actions and resolutions, and the speed of it truly is mind-boggling. I think it is definitely made with the expectation that no viewer is gonna digest all of it in one viewing, but that's kind of the point, is that you'll have fun going back and rewatching it, and the box office attests to the fact that plenty of people in Japan did just that, but also it's the overall scope of it. It is the intensity. It is what you're talking about, Sean, the overall impression you get of just how much the main team has planned this thing out, how much they are wrecking the shit of the villains. It is that overall symphonic quality to it that you get, and it is very experiential. I don't know about you, Sean, but this movie ended, and I had to take a deep breath and go, oh God, what's my normal breathing rate again? Because it just takes your body over at a certain point, and it's incredible. And then it does the fucking Char's counterattack ending. That's one of my favorite things. And it's clearly also an homage to that, because it does the same kind of thing where the last beat happens and then the credits just start rolling and you're like, what? And there's still about 2 minutes of the song is playing and Lacus has her final narration, and then the final moment is them in the ocean together. But it is just the full Char's counterattack style mic drop of, we did it, that was the last beat, credits roll. And it's... more movies should do that. It's fucking incredible. There's only about 90 seconds of credits running on black screen at the end of this thing. You are out of the theater into the parking lot 2 minutes after the last mobile suit blows up. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is definitely, it knows to just end when it's done. It's good. You don't need to waffle on and on with some massive epilogue. It's nope, it's over. We did it. We won the day. Lacus, give your speech and let's wrap it up. But there before we go through the ending, that part of the ending, the ending, there are some beats in that giant action spectacle that I want to point out that just really stood out to me. One of them, Shinn, just gets some fucking absolutely insane shit that goes on. So he just basically wipes out all the Black Knights except for the Nakamura Yuichi character. And they do it's the most fucking edgy, hot topic ass thing has ever happened in the history of anime, where the bad guys do that thing where they say, oh, fall into darkness, Shinn, which is what they did with Kira, right? It's oh, fall into darkness, when they try to mind control him. But then they're the specter of fucking Stella from Destiny comes out and turns into fucking a monster and psychically attacks them, and they have the most hot topic line ever, which is, oh, his darkness is just too extreme. And yes. I'm yes, it is. You are right, because this boy has been on some, you don't even know the Stella shit's only scratching the fucking surface. This dude's been on some shit for a while, and you have fucked up if you're trying to get into that kid's head. It's so good. I love just how ridiculous edgy teenager that line is. And it's from the Matsuoka Yoshitsugu character gets to say it too, which just like makes it even better. It's what's his name? Dan Harper. Dan Harper gets to say that line. And then Shinn just goes full Naruto on their ass, and he's like, oh, well, that's not how you use, like, duplicates or after images is basically what he's saying.
Yes.
It's like, this is how you use them. And then just, like, the Destiny Gundam turns into, like, 100 Destiny Gundams. It just fucking flies and blows them all up. And you can't even process what's literally happening. Like, has he made literal clones? Is it a Dragon Ball thing that it's like, because I think they use the word Zanzo there, where it's like he's moving so fast that it looks like an after image. Like, what is even happening here? I don't know. I just know it's incredibly fucking cool and absolutely ridiculous. And I was 100% into it.
Yes, that is the most mindfuck moment, I think, of the entire ending sequences. Everything with Shinn, absolutely. Yeah. What other moments did you want to talk about? I know the one I want to jump to, but it's closer to the end.
Okay, well, one of the ones also, this is not like the biggest moment, but it was one that put a huge smile on my face, is when Othrin comes in, and at the midpoint of the movie, he came on in his Char red Zagok, which is great, and they do a little reference to the Char Zagok shot, where they do like a first-person shot looking at it, and it like moves in slow motion in the way it did in that one episode of Mobile Suit Gundam. That's very good. Then in the finale, first he's in the Freedom Gundam, then they swap, and Kira gets in it, and then he comes in, he starts fighting Shura in the Char Zagok again, and it gets hit by all those giant needles that that Shura shoots out. And then you're like, oh no, Othrin's gotten defeated. And then it's like, no, it hasn't, because part of the face of the Zagok like fucking chips off, and you see a Gundam face under it. And that's where the, like, I think it's called the Infinite Justice, I think is what his new Gundam is called. But that's where that was, and it fucking, his red Infinite Justice Gundam explodes out of the carcass of the Char Zagok and jumps up and takes out his like Darth Maul fucking lightsaber, and it is so fucking dumb in the best possible way that he hid his Gundam. It's a Trojan horse Gundam. His Gundam was inside a fucking Zagok the whole time. I don't even understand why you would do that. It's just so cool though. It's so good.
It's so good. I mean, let's pause for a second and talk about how good the mobile suits are in this, Sean. Because they're fantastic, and they do something that Seed and Destiny both did, where they just bring back original mobile suits from 79.
Yeah.
And they call them that. So you have the Zagok, you have the Gyan is the one that Agnes has. Obviously, that pleased me. You have another of Char's red mobile suits at the beginning.
The Gelgoog. And the Gelgoog.
Yep. I love all of that, and they look great. And then, of course, the updated designs for, the Freedom, the Justice, the Destiny, they couldn't look better. They're so good. They're so crazy. Obviously, I am a very big fan also of Mulaflaga's, gold colored,
I forget
the Hakashiki style one, but that's one that looks really good in CGI because they can make it so luminescent and it just looks great on screen. And I really, really love Orphe's Gundam that he is in at the or mobile suit that he's in at the end, which is that white one that kind of looks like an evil version, honestly, of Amuro's suit from Char's Counterattack, because it's got like all the like fins around it, but it's like in a big angel halo. That is a sick looking mobile suit.
Yeah, it's also got a little bit of like F91 energy to me, where the F91, like the bad guy mobile suits had that like very ornate sort of knightly look to them. Yeah, it's very good. I mean, I'll say that as soon as the movie finished, I bought Gundam Breaker 4, which I had not bought yet because I'm playing multiple other games right now, and I don't know when I have time to play Gundam Breaker 4. I don't even know, I actually should look it up. I don't even know if those mobile suits are in Gundam Breaker 4, if that will be DLC at some point. But I was like, goddamn, mobile suits are cool. Like Seed has always had some of my favorite Gundams. Like I think Okuwara's designs, some of my favorite of his designs are in Gundam Seed. So like the Freedom Gundam, the Justice Gundam, the Destiny Gundam is so cool. I like the Impulse as well, which is Shinn's original Gundam that Luna Maria is in for the finale here. And they do, they just have a lot of good moments where they bring back little tiny things from Seed and Seed Destiny, where like when the Gundams lose power, they lose their color and stuff like that, and Shinn has to go recharge Luna Maria's energy with the Deuterion beam and all that kind of shit. Like that stuff is incredibly fun. And I like that they get all those little weird details, like the big weird ass swords, the really cool beam swords from Seed that are like the giant metal frame with like the buzzsaw, like one laser that kind of connects them at the end. It's very good.
It's outstanding, and I agree with all of that. I have not bought Gundam Breaker 4 yet. I really want to. I have way too many other games I'm playing right now, so I might wait for a sale or something. But I would love to buy some Gunpla from this. I don't know if there is. I really hope that the one of Othran's Suit, the Justice, has a shell of a Zagok that you can put around it so you can make that for yourself. That'd be great. They should do that.
I don't even know if the proportions of that make any kind of goddamn sense. Of
course it doesn't.
Like, obviously the Zok is like a little bit of a bulky boy, but he's also kind of small. So, like, he's a short, like, chunky boy. I don't know if you could fit a whole Gundam in there, but it is such a fucking ridiculous great moment.
It is so good. And then, Sean, obviously, we can't not talk about, the people are wanting us to talk about Lacus in her mobile suit and in her space suit, which is, this movie does not do as much of the fan servicey stuff as the TV shows did, but it saves it all for the moment when they put Lacus in a ludicrous skin-tight outfit and have a shot aimed at the level of her ass pointing into the camera as she bends down over the, cockpit of this weird thing she's in to go meet up with Kira. And, I think it's perfect. I think it's wonderful. I think this is fan service used for good. It is so silly that I don't think you can possibly be offended by it.
Yeah, because one, I'm sure when Hideaki Anno saw this movie for one of the dozen plus times I'm sure he saw it in theaters, because he's the biggest otaku in the world. I'm sure he clapped every time that was on screen. It's like, that's my thing. I did that. The blood suit. It's me. And also I know that Tanaka Die, the voice actress that plays Lacus, does lots of sexy cosplay stuff. So I'm sure that she was also very happy to have that. And then, there's something about, in other things, I would roll my eyes more at that. In Seed, when it's Ramius and their ship gets hit by a big attack and her boobs shake all over the place, I really roll my eyes at that shit. I don't like that in Seed. Here, there's such an intense psychosexual quality to everything that's happening in the whole last 40 minutes, that, Lacus getting in the sexy skin-tight suit to go get in a mobile suit to fuse up with Kira's mobile suit, where Kira's also in his sexy skin-tight suit, and they're both in the cockpit together, and that all preceding the last shot of the movie being them both taking off their sexy skin-tight suits, throwing them on the beach, and then going and standing in the fucking beach naked together. It's like, they have earned the sexy skin-tight plug suit thing here in a way that most mecha shit that's just doing the Eva thing usually does not do it. And Eva doesn't deserve it almost ever either. Here, I think it is legitimately done in a way that feels like it is coherent with the themes of the movie.
Well, and I think part of the thing to remember is this is a 2-hour movie, not a 50-episode TV series, because part of the problem in Original Seed with what you mentioned with the Ramius, boob jiggle on the ship, is that it was every episode for 50 episodes, and it gets excessive. It does happen in this movie. There's a shot in the climax where that happens, and they do a lovingly animated, boob jiggle physics shot. But, it's once in a 2-hour movie, and that is just a different order of magnitude than 50 episodes of a TV show. Or the plug shots. Eva has a lot of girls in the plug shots. This has one or two with Lacus, and it's why the rebuild of Evangelion movies also are easier to swallow for me than the TV series, because do they have fan service? Yes. Do they have 26 episodes worth? No. And that is a different thing.
Yes. But then all of that then leads up to the most applause-worthy moment of the whole movie, because this is where then they meet up, Kira's on the ropes because he's having to fight two people at the same time, and then Othran comes in to help save him, and then Lacus comes and fuses up with the Freedom Gundam, turning it into whatever the Super Duper Freedom Gundam, I don't know what its official name is, with the golden wings. And you just get the most badass shit ever, because that's when Freedom,
Meteor.
Meteor. That's when Meteor, the song from the original Gundam Seed, starts playing. Bum bum ba-dum, bum 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 bum.
It does it on this perfect shot of it's zooming out from Lacus is standing on the shoulder of the Freedom Gundam with its wings, and it's the most perfect drop the needle right on that shot, on that cut, and it's that zoom out, and it's Orphe looking so angry because Lacus is doing this fucking pose on top of the Gundam. It's great.
Yes, and symbolically, Kira and Lacus are just fucking right in front of him, right? That is what is happening here. They're in skin-tight, basically naked suits. They're penetration has just occurred, and
literally.
Yes, and then Lacus and Kira psychically bond together, right? And they like sort of go into that seed state together, and they are like psychically communicating and working together, which is that sort of ultimate culmination of those themes where now they have given of themselves to each other, and they are both cooperating in this same battle. Also, one detail in that shot you're talking about where Lacus is floating in front of the Seed, or the Gundam Freedom, when the needle drop happens, is that you see that her suit has little tiny wings on it also. They're like little tiny angel wings, which is another nice little detail that sort of, there's a synergy there with the Freedom Gundam. But yeah, then you have Lacus and Kira are in the cockpit together. They psychically link together. Lacus does what I'm sure Kira thinks is the sexiest thing she has ever done, which is she locks on to like a million things, right? Because like Kira's whole thing is he has this little Panzer Dragoon radar thingy that locks onto everything. He shoots all of his guns and they blow all the stuff up. And that's his favorite thing to do in the world. And here Lacus is like, you think you can lock onto a lot of shit? Check this out. And like the camera does a big 3D move and zooms around and you just see everything, like every mobile suit, every ship in like a 5-mile goddamn radius is all marked and locked onto. And then they just blow them all up with like lightning. And it is sick as fuck. There's a little, like, they call it the disruptor, where she's like, oh, like, let's activate the disruptor. They're like, yeah, let's do the disruptor. It's like, this is Kira Yamato requesting permission to activate the disruptor. It's like, yes, this is President Lacus Klein giving permission. And she's just right next to him, pushes the button, and they've got the double Zeta, like, fucking forehead laser thing unlocks and opens up, and they shoot the disruptor laser that cuts through the entire fucking asteroid and then cuts all the ships in half. And they just single-handedly lay waste to the entire fucking opposing forces in the span of like 2 minutes, and then they fuck up Orphe's shit, and it is the most triumphant thing you have ever seen. It is so incredible. It's so good, and there is something about the ecstasy of this moment, of like the elation of how incredibly powerful they are. It does have this like weirdly sexual energy to it with all the other themes going on and the fan servicey stuff around it, that it is just, it's so good. It's such a perfect culmination for these two characters who have been struggling to come together and have been at odds or missing each other for the whole movie, to in this moment they are perfectly together. They are like fused together mentally and in some ways physically here. And once that happens and they can truly come together and be together, nothing can possibly stop them. And it's such a great triumphant way to end this film.
100% agree. Couple of notes I wanted to add. The name of his suits in this movie are so good. Kira starts in the Rising Freedom Gundam. That's the one in the first half. It gets destroyed. Then for the first part of the climactic battle, he is in the Strike Freedom Gundam Type 2. So it is an update of the Strike Freedom from Destiny. Then the one where he combines with Lacus is the Mighty Strike Freedom Gundam. I just love how they keep adding words onto the Gundam name as he gets new Gundams. Second, Sean, you talking about the psychic link reminds me of another great moment we forgot to talk about, which is when Othran is fighting one of the like Black Angel guys, and they're like, I can't get a read on him, because the whole thing is like they read minds, and then it's revealed that he isn't piloting, it's remote controlled by Cogally, and it does this insane camera move where the camera gains all this momentum and literally whips around the planet and comes around, and Cogally from like way, impossibly far away is fighting via the camera of Othran's cockpit. Completely ridiculous, and I love it.
Yes, because that's the whole sequence where he's fighting Shura. This is what leads to Shura's death. Because yes, that is also the moment where Shura tries to get into Othran's head, and he's just thinking about having sex with Cogally. He's like, what is wrong with you? Like, why would you bring these indecent thoughts onto the battlefield?
I love that. That is the moment you hire Nakamura Yuichi for. Yes. It's so good.
It's like, fucking step aside, Hideo Kojima. Can love bloom on the battlefield? You're not even like approaching the right question here. It's like, can you just fantasize about having sex on the battlefield and use that to beat your opponent? Like, Othran's like so far ahead of fucking Solid Snake in that game, man. It's great. Yes, and all that's amazing. And I love just Othran stunting on that dude the whole time, because he's just constantly going like, well, aren't you supposed to be able to read minds? Like, man, you're just absolutely useless. Like, what is even the point of you? And it just gets him pissed off until Othran kills him. It's just that whole last 40 minutes. It is so good. Again, I was like literally shaking when the movie ended because I was so fucking hyped up by everything it had done. And I was like, and I couldn't go to bed for like 2 hours because I just couldn't get to sleep because I was thinking about the movie so much.
I was in a very, and again, this was my second time watching it, was this evening, and I just was kind of just sitting staring into space for a little while, replaying it in my head. Oh, it's so good. Another thing I want to praise, we mentioned it early on, I just want to shout out the music again by Toshihiko Sahashi. It is so good. I think the thing I've always loved about Gundam Seed music is that it strikes this very particular balance to me between the very cinematic style that Shigeaki Saigusa brought to Zeta and Double Zeta and Char's Counterattack, where it feels very like big and orchestral, but then it also has some of the like weird instrumentation of original Gundam's music and some of the like more playful elements there. So it's both sort of very classical, but also just a little bit out there in the ways that Gundam Seed is. And I think this is the best version of it because it is a, you know, bespoke 2-hour movie soundtrack. And particularly, I have listened a lot to, it's a 2-disc soundtrack. I mean, obviously, digitally, it's just, you know, a list of tracks, but you know what I mean. But like the second disc, which is basically the last hour of this movie, is just a great get hyped piece of film score, and I love it. And it is also a throwback. It does not sound like an anime soundtrack from 2024, and that is part of what is so fucking good about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because again, there's just so much. There were so many good, like really well done callbacks to the original soundtrack. Like in this big final sequence, the moment, I believe it's when Lacus gets into the backpack thing that she's going to deliver to the Freedom Gundam, is when there's this big triumphant like military version of the melody from Shizuka no Yoru, or Quiet Night, which is the song that she sings in the original Gundam Seed. And they use that melody from that in different pieces as Lacus's kind of like leitmotif, but it's usually like in the same kind of slightly somber register as the original song, whereas here it's this like big fucking battle version of it, which is very cool. It just like helps underpin that, you know, Lacus is sort of like stepping into this slightly different world that she's avoided being in for the rest of the movie.
Yes, absolutely. And it's just full of great moments like that. It's a triumphant soundtrack. It's another one that it's kind of like the script of the movie. You can feel that like the artist had been thinking about it for a long time. Mm-hmm. There's a real sense of like focus and mastery to it and polish. But that's true of so much of this movie. Yeah, and we've been talking a lot about the climax, but like that middle sequence where everything goes to shit in the in Eurasia is also just a great example of chaotic Gundam action, where the ending is chaotic in its own way, but it is the heroes in control of the chaos. That middle section is nobody knows what's going on except the villains, and it is very stressful and very well done. And of course, the whole opening, just to get everyone hyped for the movie, where the song Freedom is playing, is also great. So consistently, whenever action breaks out in this movie, it is a double plus S tier Gundam material.
Yeah, that middle one has some really great moments. Like, I really love when Luna Maria snipes the one nuke out of the air, but then she can't quite get the second one. Like, that's a really great little beat. And just all the stuff of, like, where I like that the good guys very quickly catch on, or at least all the good guys involved in the fight very quickly realize what is happening, but it's too late because their comms have all been cut off. It's another thing where it's just like this whole movie compared to Destiny is satisfying because all the good guys feel competent and smart. Like, they're able to feel competent and smart even when they're being tricked, which is a thing that Destiny just couldn't manage, was making it feel like our good guys aren't idiots. It's just they have been outplayed this one time. Because you just don't want to, it's hard to root for characters that just come across as morons constantly. And that's so much of what it felt like in Seed Destiny, where you just could not figure out why these people are so bad at what they're doing. Whereas in this movie, it makes sense that they have no reason to suspect that this other faction is going to betray them. On the surface, it would make absolutely zero sense because they don't know that they're the Accords and tied to the Destiny plan and all that shit yet. And so when they're taken unawares, it makes sense. As soon as they're taken unawares, they do everything they can to survive, and then they regroup, and then they fuck their shit up. And it's like, thank you. I like that my good guys don't feel like they're morons for the whole movie.
Yeah, Captain Ramius continues to be, like, right up there with Bright as, like, the most competent captains who, like, you get her in the middle of a war, and she's going to win that fucking war for you. You know, she is the best at what she does.
Yeah, there's that one great moment in the middle of the big middle action scene where I think it's Shura comes in to go blow up the command station of the Archangel, and Ramius is the only one left, and she sees it, and she like pulls a lever, and the seat like goes down, which is like a cool moment. They're like, oh, how could we have never seen anybody in Gundam ever do this before? And all these, you have, you know, the classic shot of the mobile suit coming up right to the window of the command room, and all the people going like, ah, and then they just get blown up. It's like, no, Ramius isn't an idiot. She's like, no, I've got a fucking thing. It's just like sending me somewhere else, so I'm not just sitting here like a moron getting my ass blown up.
Yes. She rocks. Love her. But yeah, the more we talk about this movie, Sean, the more I love it. You know, seeing it a second time made me love it more than even when I saw it in theaters. It's awesome. It's Gundam Seed. It's good Gundam Seed. It's so much... Listen to how in this conversation, Sean, we've been able to laugh at the bad parts of Destiny so much more easily, because who fucking cares now? The ending is good. A good ending can honestly make up for just about a number of sins. And like, you know, I think before this movie, it would be hard for me to ever imagine watching Destiny again. But now I'm like, if I want to rewatch all of Seed, sure. Why the hell not? Because it's so much more easy to go through the bad parts of Destiny and be like, well, this is kind of funny that they did this, because later on, Shinn gets to imagine Stella in space and blow up everyone, and they go, his darkness is overwhelming. It kind of makes up for it all. Yeah,
and I think for, like, me, it would make, like, you know, because I have had the experience not just of watching Seed Destiny, I have had the experience of re-watching Seed Destiny. Re-watching Seed Destiny is a pretty brutal thing to go through, because you can't fully enjoy the parts of it that are good in the first half, because you know it's all going to fall to fucking pieces. But like, I think that this would make rewatching Seed Destiny a fundamentally different experience, because you know that in the end there will be payoff to these things. There will be payoff to the Destiny plan. There will be payoff to Durandal. There will be payoff to Shinn. There will be payoff for Kira and Lacus, and their overall story arc will ultimately go somewhere. And so I imagine that will make it a lot easier to enjoy, like, the Stella arc in Seed Destiny, which on its own is really good. Like, that stuff's great. There's some fucking amazing episodes of Seed Destiny dealing with Stella and, like, her death and all of that. But in the moment, it's hard to appreciate that if you know it's all going to be for naught in the end. Now you know it's all going to be for Kashima Hoko to once again be able to play two characters in one Gundam Seed thing, which I'm just always here for that. In her Stella cameo, and you get the most hot topic line in the history of any anime with, "Oh, his darkness is just too extreme," and you're like, yes, it's all been worth it.
It's honestly, it's like, if that line had been in the original Gundam Seed, that's the one that would have been big on Cartoon Network, not Gundam Wing. Can you imagine that in a Toonami promo, Sean? Some shitty English voice actor in 2001 going, his darkness is overwhelming. And then Peter Cullen going, Gundam Seed Destiny, tonight on Cartoon Network.
Gundam Seed Destiny, Saturdays at 7.
Yeah, exactly. This is great. I love this movie, Sean.
I love this movie. I love this movie so much. And because it's so much fun, but it does also have a really good theme and heart. Because I did copy down the ending speech that Lacus gives over the ending credits, because I love this speech, and I think it's such a great, like, both kind of like in some ways a summation of the movie, but it just feels like this great, like, sort of call for love and for what love gives to you in your life. I just think I love the way this is written, particularly how Tanaka says it. I'm just going to read this out. I changed a little bit of the translation here and there, but it's mostly just the kind of stock translation you can find online. So Lacus says at the end of the movie, the opposite of love isn't hatred. The opposite of love is indifference, which right off the bat, I think that's an incredibly great line. It's so... Yes. As soon as I heard her say that, I'm like, fuck yeah, this movie's really good. You are there inside of me. Am I inside of you? The joy from your existence within me, the strength from my existence inside you. I cannot tell if it's bright or dark, because the future can't be seen at all. But if they have hands to hold, if they have hearts to support each other, even the blind pair will be able to move forward. For the sake of the hands that connect us, let's learn more about each other to make these hands stronger. I will speak of all the many things in my heart, all the little things. That is why I want you to talk to me as well, of all the many little things that live in your heart as well.
I know we're never going to know for sure what Chiaki Morosawa wrote in this movie and what she didn't. She wrote that, right? Yeah. I'm pretty sure, based on the language of Gundam Seed that we know from the original show, that feels like something she wrote, or it is a really good, version of something she would write. it is so true to this series. It is such a beautiful piece of writing, and it is such a beautiful capper to, and I think this is just inseparable from what the movie is. It is a husband directing the last story his wife didn't get to finish, and that is so, like, it is an act of love. It is not just a movie about love. This movie is an act of love. It is an act of love for Gundam Seed, for this thing that all these people were so passionate about that 20 years later, everybody came back together to work on it. But it is also that core thing of, you know, it's so sad to think about what Fukuda and Morosawa went through in that, you know, decade after Destiny, dealing with her illness, but that, you know, he then got to come back and make something truly extraordinary and beautiful out of it. There just is an extra resonance that, like, you can't Death of the Author this. I'm sorry. It is such a beautiful thing that this movie is, that is part of it. And I think it adds it illuminates so much of what this movie is and what it is doing. And that final speech, that is the right set of words for Gundam Seed to end on.
Yeah. And it feels so true of it. And it feels very true to, like, my relationship to Gundam Seed, particularly that first line of the opposite of love isn't hatred. The opposite of love is indifference, because it's like, I am not indifferent to Gundam Seed Destiny. I was never indifferent to that series, right? Like, I'm indifferent to Gundam Build Divers. Like, I will fucking, you know, joke on Gundam Build Divers because it's funny, because the end of that series is so ridiculous. But that whole show is incredibly boring and dull. And there's kind of not anything particularly redeemable about it. And so I'm indifferent to its existence. Whereas, like, you know, hatred is too strong of a word, because I don't want to say that I hate Seed Destiny, but, like, it is more in that realm of, like, this, like, why can't you be the thing that I really know you can be and I want you to be? And it's like, there is something about Gundam Seed that I just love this series for all of its weird quirks and faults, and the bizarre elements about it, to me, are all part of the charm. Which is so much about, like, what it's like falling in love with a person, is, like, you know that, like, oh, this person's not fucking perfect. You know, so they might do things that are stupid or aggravating. They might make huge mistakes. But if you ever became indifferent to a person, then those feelings for that person are just gone, right? And so the sense of that this version of this person that you love exists within you, and a version of you exists within the person that you love, or this they love you back, right? And that desire to make those existences, these little joys in each other, stronger, more robust by learning more and working together. Like, what a beautiful image in this idea. And I think it's even more potently strong, I think, of the way it's worded in Japanese, but obviously the English can still get the main point across. But the sense of, like, this image of holding hands on the beach, and by learning more each other, that grip grows stronger and stronger, that your attachment grows stronger and stronger, and that this is not only the way that you can be more fulfilled in life, but the overall message of the movie is this is also the way that we make the world a better place to live in, is by everybody doing this, by everybody going through this journey, by everybody experiencing this kind of love and trying to make that love stronger. And that's what Lacus and Kira are fighting for, and what Lacus is able to put words to throughout the movie that the bad guys can't understand, because they don't want to learn about the other person. They don't want to walk hand in hand with that other person. They just want that person to be given to them as a matter of fact. And that's not the way that human relationships should ever work. And so it is such a, like, powerful ending that is such an ode to what it is to love, in both the good and the bad, and the power of what that love can do.
Yeah. I don't think I could say it any better, and I think that's a good place to leave this one off. Weekly Suit Gundam will be back whenever they get that second Hathaway movie made, or a new Gundam show comes out, I guess.
Yeah, you know, hopefully it'll be next week, because we got to keep pumping these out week by the title of the show, Jonathan.
I know.
Yeah.
Actually, next week we will be back with another Japanimation Station bonus episode, where we will be reviewing the Hashira training arc of Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yaiba, the 4th season that aired over this summer, that we couldn't review at the time because we were out in Kyoto, and we just didn't get good TV reception there. You know, we couldn't do it. It wasn't out on Blu-ray yet.
Weird that we couldn't see Kimetsu no Yaiba in fucking Japan. Like, oh, it's just like, you know, you just can't see it anywhere. I guess people in Japan just don't like that show. It's like, you know, it's that weird thing where it's a big hit overseas, but just domestically, it just never really got a lot of traction.
But no, we're going to do that as another little bonus before Japanimation Station goes into hibernation while we work on Season 5, our grand tour that will be premiering this winter. But yeah, for now, Weekly Suit Gundam. We love you. We're glad we got to come back. Gundam rocks. This movie reminded me how much I just fucking adore Gundam. I want more Gundam in my life all the time. And I'm glad we got to talk about this movie, Sean. This was a cathartic and fun conversation.
Yeah, this was a very fun podcast to do. I'm very excited to do Kimetsu no Yaiba next week. I'm a little bit less excited for what we're going to do after that. I've been watching a lot of the show we're doing after that. And it's, I've gotten to the better part of that show, but it takes a while. But I want to close out here, Jonathan. I actually found, I think, a critical response to the show, to Gundam Seed Freedom, on Wikipedia that I thought was really good. And I just wanted to read this out to close this out, because I was skimming through the Wikipedia page and I thought, oh, there's a name here I recognize. So this is from the critical response on the English Mobile Suit Gundam Seed Freedom page. It says, Jonathan Lack praised the narrative for focusing on the couple of Kira and Lacus, who appear to be portrayed more seriously and humanly than in Destiny, as the romantic relationship is properly explored in a similar fashion to Fukuda and Morosawa's relationship. While praising the animation for the handling of fight scenes, the writer still felt there were issues with the handling of character designs that might make the previous remasters of Seed and Destiny look more polished. I don't know if whoever wrote that really processed, Jonathan, your review, but I thought it was an interesting comment.